We are live.
All right, Chris. Well, hold on, because I haven't done one of these in a while, and I got to like warm up my brain muscles in order to do it. But long ago, the four nations lived in harmony, and then everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. And F you, Luke. That's all I'm gonna say. I stole your intro. What's up, people? This is the Talking TV podcast. We're back. I'm Dom. That's Chris. But oh man, Chris, we've got, to quote the schmoes know from back in the day, because they use this phrase all the time, and I stole a bunch of stuff from them. I don't care. They're not popular anymore. We've got a barn burner of an episode today.
Yeah, I mean, I'm never one for destroying someone's personal property, but if you had to describe it that way, I can't say I disagree.
There's literally no other phrase that I could use in order to describe this episode. I like.
I could have thought of like 20 other phrases, but that's why you're the one doing the intro.
You could have really jumped in and said anything else. You know me. I'm not gonna
dude. Listen, you did a great job. Your synopsis was very streamlined and perfect, because essentially that is the show, and all the little fun stuff that happens in between.
Okay. Let's preface that by saying that was what the show was. It really hasn't been what it's been for the last couple of weeks, if we're being completely honest. But as I've said in the past, this is kind of getting back to the format that I wish the show had been because it kind of was when we first started. Just a bunch of dudes hanging out, just shooting the shit, talking about stuff that they love, and having an absolute blast, roasting each other, cutting each other off every 3 seconds, and overall just being fun and entertaining about the stuff that they're talking about. And Chris,
I meant the show Avatar, but our show as well. You made a good point for that.
We keep doing this. We keep mentioning the word show, but we always have like a different thing on our minds when we do it. But oh man, Chris, it's whatever. Yeah, I don't care. I just want to get to introducing these guests, because we actually managed to get pulled together not one, not two, but three very, very important guests. Two of whom have been on the show before. One of whom is making his Talking TV debut today. Dude, like, I don't know, like, do you want to like give a little bit of your personal history? Because you've obviously got more history with any of these guys, than anybody else.
Yeah, so this next guest, who will remain nameless until we bring him in here and allow him the privilege of introducing himself, essentially got me fired from a job that I was definitely overpaid for, because, I kind of knew the boss. So that does help in life. And we went on this tour, and we played this barbecue backyard up in Buffalo, New York. And the rednecks really liked us around the barbecue, but it was also kind of sketchy. And then I slammed one of our other guests' finger in a car door trunk, and that was pretty scary for a second. So then it was a 2-part tour, right? So we come home from the first weekend. I had taken off for that tour, and then I was like, damn, that was like super lit. And my boss didn't give me off. Like, I thought he was gonna give me off for the second weekend of the tour, but he didn't. So I was like, oh man, I don't know, like, if I should go. And I didn't end up going when Luke told me I should go. But the thing is, I got fired for going the first time anyways, because it turns out I took off the Friday and Saturday and not the Sunday. So Luke kind of got me fired because of his terrible ass routing. And I'll always forever be pissed at him, but also forever love him, because that was such a fun time. That was a great tour. He drove the whole time like a goddamn champ. He let us play Jurassic Park while he listened to the audio, and our guest Johnny and I sat in the back seat listening to it. And so I have a lot of good memories with this kid, and they're not just music memories, which is why I go into these tangents, because I've spent a lot of real world time with this guy, and I have a couple funny ass movie memories, like having him rock out to the audio of Jurassic Park good host. Me and Johnny were watching it in the back seat.
Since we basically just spoiled who 2 of our 3 guests are going to be right now, you may as well just bring them in. But ladies and gentlemen, people, Mr. Johnny Manna and Mr. Luciano Ferrara is his last name, right? I just realized I just don't actually know his last name.
So we're gonna introduce one of our guests right now. This is Luke Ferrara. Luke, welcome to the show, man.
Luciano, Luke. Speaking of which, I also just love that your name is actually Luciano. That's dope. You should go by that more often.
Long ago, the 4 vloggers lived in peace and harmony.
Nope. Already did it.
When Dom
Sorry,
started
move on.
talking.
Next thing. There we go.
Man.
Now we're getting somewhere.
Oh man, this is a chaotic one, Luke.
My name is Luciano Ferrara. You may be confused by my separate server name of Chungle Down Bim. Don't worry about it. This is cool. I like watching Avatar. Avatar and like Ed, and Eddie were like 2 things I watched a lot with my dad. And Samurai Jack. which got me like really into kind of like Asian culture. And I don't mean like anime shit. Like I really like a lot of like the art design, the like environmental art in Last Airbender. I think is really great. They really touch on a lot of like very passionate like architecture, like with like the air temples and stuff. I thought was like one of my favorite scenes and like kind of environments for them to be in. Things just felt really like whimsical and stuff, so that really got me into the show. And then like you start following character development and it's like really crazy. So that's why I'm excited to be on this particular episode. I'm also excited to be talking with a bunch of my friends. Chris and I have done, like he said, done lots of music stuff together. I wouldn't say I got him fired. I would say he got himself fired because what he failed to mention was that Johnny and I had a terrible plan tour. And at the last second, Chris decided he wanted to come hang too. So we threw him in the back of my Kia Sorento. And I listened to Jurassic Park on the drive down from Niagara Falls to where were we going? Pittsburgh. And we did play for a homeless guy and two people at a trap house around a gasoline fire. That did happen. It was really shitty.
Yeah. Luke, you do a bunch of other stuff too,
Johnny,
though. Where can people Oh no, where can people find you on the internet? Keep up to date with all your art and all that stuff before we bring Johnny in here.
So I played for a very long time as like a solo artist. I now have a band called The Ensuing Disaster. You can find us on like at Ensuing Disaster. You can find me at Luciano R. Ferrara. That's pretty much everywhere. You can also actually, if you've got some time, you can check out my portfolio at Luke Ferrara 1734. And at journoportfolio.com. That's where a lot of like my creative writing, some of my like research papers and stuff are, lots of my text stuff. I also DM a campaign based on a thesis and novel that I'm writing about lumberjack folklore. Chris and also Johnny are two of my PCs in that campaign. So whenever we get that back together on Twitch, you can find us at Fearsome Critters RPG. I think that's just about everything that I do.
No, I think that is, and we'll allow you to obviously again at the end of the episode let people know where they can find you and keep up to date with all that it is you do. And you know what? Yeah, I could have planned better for that tour, but it was just such a crazy, hectic experience. It's like a whirlwind, that tour. And someone else who was on that tour, and another good friend of the show, he was our first ever guest on our first ever episode, which I guess could be a little
long awaited return. Mr. Johnny Manna. Johnny, happy to have you back, dude.
Hey, how's it going, guys? Thank you for having me. Yes, as they said, I'm Johnny Manna, and The Last Airbender was one of my favorite shows growing up, and it still is. So I'm happy to talk about it with you guys and hear what you guys have to say.
Yeah, and Johnny, we'll get to what we have to say in a little bit, but real quick, I want to know what you have to say. You're a very active musician. You're constantly releasing music, and it's all really good. So why don't you tell people a little bit about where that is and what you want to let them know about that?
Well, thank you, Chris. Yeah. I have all my music available basically on all streaming services, like everywhere music can be found, like, for example, just Spotify and Apple Music. I have a lot of new songs, a lot of new material in the works. I'm hoping to potentially have another release scheduled for early, maybe mid-fall. Working on some stuff actually currently in the last few weeks, actually, and I'm really liking how it's coming out. So if anyone watching this wanted to look into that, I would really appreciate it. That's just under my name, Johnny Manna, which you could find in the lower left-hand corner right now, which is also where you could find me, or what you could use to find me on all social media platforms too. So thank you. And yes, it was really fun getting my hands slammed in the trunk the first night of my first tour.
It could have been way worse, and I think that's the good part about it. No, I know that was really weird. Yeah, it was just so funny. Like, I feel like I remember we left it there for a second too, because I was so shocked I had done that to you by accident.
Yeah, we were all just kind of looking at it, just like, what now? Like, what happens next?
Oh man! And just so you guys know, really quick. Everyone's links and information that they want you to know will be in the description as well. And so with that being said, before we get into this what I think is going to be a very epic and intense conversation, we got to introduce our last guest. Dom, who's our last guest here today?
We finally managed to pull him over from the other podcast. It was long and difficult. This guy hasn't been on an episode since our infamous marriage story episode, which if I'm remembering correctly, it's still like one of our most listened to podcasts, which makes no sense because who the hell wants to listen to a podcast about a movie about a miserable divorce? But needless to say, straight from the Talkin' podcast with Andrew and Chris, Mr. Andrew Gyomai. I think I finally got his last name correctly. I think, Andrew, you're going to have to let me know about that.
Flamio, hot man.
Yes.
Someone had to do it.
Glad to have you
I
here,
already
Andrew.
forgot how you just said it. My last name's Gyomai. Pretty simple.
Okay, then you could just forget how I actually pronounce
throwing
that.
shade. What's up, Andrew? How you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good. Just prepared myself some Easy Max, so I'm gonna be chilling real easy this whole time, and really excited to be talking about one of the best shows ever made. So
Yeah,
really
Andrew,
excited to be talking again.
Before I take you off what is being coined here on the Talkin' TV network, the big box, I have 2 requests of you. Number 1
I like that.
is thanks, Luke. Is where can the people find you and what do you want them to know about all the things you do creatively?
Well, as you guys already mentioned, I'm on another podcast with the TV nerd himself, Chris. It's called Talking with Andrew and Chris, and we talk about things that aren't TV and movies, but sometimes we mention TV and movies, but we also talk about a lot more because ours is for grown-ups. And
I talked on that.
I'm just throwing shade at Dom.
Oh God!
I'm also going to be launching another podcast pretty soon, so be stoked on that. And follow me, where's my hand go? Right here on Instagram to find out when that's happening and more about that. And besides that,
yeah,
whatever Chris said is fine for plugs.
Sure, but the second
Whatever
request
Chris said.
The second request we have of you while you're in the big box is I think we need a big bite of your Easy Mac before we really get into this Avatar episode.
Oh yeah,
We're breaking
show
bread
off
here
kind of
tonight,
Eat
boys.
that
podcast,
Easy
not
Mac,
ASMR.
Andrew.
Oh yeah, look at that.
Yeah, show it off. Show off this big
Weird.
bite.
Oh
Yo,
man,
Enjoy it.
I signed up
Nourish
to talk
it.
about
Yeah,
Avatar, not
dude.
watch a Crave food commercial.
fuck
Then
yeah,
you
dude.
clearly are not on
Also-
the right podcast. then, Luke.
Also,
That's why I came. here.
Yeah.
you probably can't really tell, but that's an
terrible
Avatar.
fucking-
That's an Aang t-shirt that Chris got me for Christmas.
It is.
I can't see; it's too far in the background, but I'll take your word for it.
Just trust me, bro.
Oh,
Yeah,
wait.
just trust him.
I might.
So, guys, this is something I've been waiting for quite some time because this is a show that I always watched in pieces when I was growing up because it kind of came around when I was really starting to get into like anime. So it's not that I like had any, hate or anything towards this show. I was just sort of, my taste had changed at this point. I wasn't necessarily a Nickelodeon watcher when the show was airing, but hanging out with Andrew, Dom, Johnny, Luke, it's come up quite a bit. Hanging out with Chris and all the Chris's. I won't name their preferences on this show.
There's too many
but,
to keep track of.
the order. But everyone that I know speaks about the show. So I finally sat down and watched it because there was no better time than when you have a podcast that talks about television and movies, and when it's trending #1 in the world, almost
Hell
15
yeah.
years after it aired. So I'm very excited to get into this because I am a first-time finisher. I literally just finished this show today. So I'm here, I am alive, and I am ready to go. And I'm throwing it to anyone right now who wants to jump into this thing because I'm ready to just get the rails off this train.
I mean, I'm the co-host, so I feel like I should just kick this off by let's kind of start this panel topic of conversation, which is it's a question, if I can actually speak, that I like to pose to everyone whenever we have new guests, which is, what is your first memory of watching the show, and what is it about the show that first drew you into it? I don't care who goes first. Literally anybody could just jump in here.
I kind of already talked about that, but I would
True,
just
but,
like
like,
to
go more in
reiterate,
depth with
like, the art
Just
style
reiterate it.
I missed it, so
was really cool. I had said a bunch of stuff about like the art style and especially like the environment art that I thought that like a lot of the landscapes and also like, and to kind of like build on that, I really like the way that like cultural mythology and like folklore gets pulled in, like with what is it? She's like the lady of the river,
The
or
painted
something,
lady?
right? Where she's the painted lady. Yeah, the painted lady.
Yeah.
That's like really cool. The blood bending witch,
Mhm.
like all of those kind of like folklore tales that they can pull into it. And I think that also goes for like the animal combinations as
Yeah.
like cryptids or like a folklore
So
type of
good.
thing. I really also like resonated with that. So I will say like what got me was the art style and how it incorporated like a lot of environment for like I guess it'd be like feudal Japan, right? That's kind of like what they're going for. feudal
Yeah, it's
era.
like
think
it's
that's
like
not
the
like
really
it's
hard
like-
to tell.
Victorian, so I'm
I
not
feel
like-
around that time period.
I feel like it's more like the Three Kingdoms era of China kind of thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I
I
like
feel like
if
it's
you've
pulling
ever
a lot of
played
influences.
so I won't like
If you've
posit
ever
that,
played
but
the
so I like that a
Dynasty
lot.
Warriors kinds of games, I feel like
Ooh,
it's
wow.
like that
So
kind
I'm
of.
literally
Humble-
downloading Ghost
Humble, not
of,
humble flex right there, Andrew.
I mean, I'm a
I'm
gamer.
deadass
What can I
downloading
say?
Ghost of Tsushima right now. Like in the other room, I have Ghost of Tsushima downloading, and I'm really excited to play it.
Yeah, there you go.
Anyways,
you know,
Johnny,
I
what's your
think it,
first memory of Avatar?
Well, real quick, I think it does
Okay,
serve
go
the
first.
show well that it kind of is nondescript in that sense. But Luke, I want to know what you guys kind of like grew up like if you grew up watching this show or if you got into it later on in life. So like Luke, before we jump to Johnny, like what age were you when you were first introduced to the show? Because I feel like that is kind of important.
I mean, when did the series start? Did anybody
2005.
know off the top of their head?
2005 was when
Okay,
it
so it's
started.
probably like 10. I would say like when it started. I mean, my dad was really into that. My dad is really into Asian culture. And like I think that we would watch it because he liked Samurai Jack, and then that would come on, and so we didn't spend like a ton of time together when I was younger, so like I would be there in the morning before going to school, before getting on the school bus, and like we would watch like Ed, Edd n Eddy until the morning, and then I would come home and we would watch Avatar, and that was like two things. So my dad actually got me like a big like collector DVD thing of Avatar and the terrible movie that shall not be named.
Yeah, we don't
it's the
talk about
same
that
name.
movie. What movie are you talking about? I have no idea.
So my dad got me really into that kind of like that whole concept and kept it like going. I remember when I had an iPod Nano and I would use it to like watch video, or like the one that could watch video. It was like a really shitty.
I had that one.
Everyone had like just enough.
What
I
space.
remember that
Video
iPod.
It was like the,
that
yeah.
iPod.
And
I loaded that shit up with
I
YouTube
bought
videos.
the 4 episodes of the finale. I would buy the
This
4
podcast
episodes
is
of the
officially
finale when we went
dated.
on vacation. I would watch the finale. So it was really good.
Nice.
So I would always watch the finale and stuff. Actually, speaking of that, I wanted to show this because I had it pulled up. I don't know if it'll work. But in my first apartment, I graffitied the look of Aang when he goes into the Avatar state with all 4 of the elements around him. And I did a graffiti of that in my basement. So that was
Wow.
that image always,
Fraggle
that, like,
Rock,
image
huh?
of his face always stuck with me. Yeah, rest in peace to Fraggle Rock.
Very cool, Johnny, man. Avatar, what's it mean to you? When did you first watch it? And more if you want to.
Well, I do remember actually, like my first early memories of the show were watching the first few episodes, like the Southern Air Temple, the Kyoshi Warriors, and just the Boy in the Iceberg, which is the pilot episode. And I definitely just had an interest in it, like right off the bat. I remember actually I was like still in Cub Scouts when that show was coming out, so I like make the connection. Like I instantly remember it as being when I was in elementary school, and because I just remember like watching it at night, like before going to like Cub Scout meetings, which is like a weird just connection that I made to it. And then I don't think I watched like the entire season, like every episode of season 1, for example, just like weekly. But then I remember like I think when the Northern Air Temple episode came out, and then the finale of season 1 came out, and suddenly it just got super serious out of nowhere. Not that there weren't serious moments like in season 1 before that. Like a lot of the Zuko Iroh dynamic was pretty serious, but like in my opinion, the finale of season 1 was the first just like from start to finish, just like super serious episode, especially just like when Iroh just like turns on Admiral Zhao just at the end when he destroys the moon spirit. Like when that happened, I was just like, wow, okay, this show has officially
moment.
reached another
Badass
level.
moment right there.
That was the moment that basically I just wanted the show. I wanted to see the show just like stay at for the rest of the show. And
Yeah. I mean, that's like the first time you
basically
see Iroh like do any sort of fighting, isn't it? Like actually firebend
I
anything.
think so. Yeah.
Besides,
Wait,
like,
what about when he got captured? What
That's
about when he got
after.
captured?
Yeah, I feel like
No, that was
Season two.
before.
it
Oh
was?
no, when he got captured by those
No, it's season
things when
2.
Zuko was tracking him, that was season 1. I
No,
thought.
that's season 2.
At the
when they
Mud
get
Spring?
captured.
that's season
Well,
2.
Yeah.
To
There's
that, I
an
will.
Earth-
Yeah, that was
Like,
season
my uncle's
two.
been captured by Earth.
It was like
Benders.
very early, very early.
Yeah, he deadass says that. Yeah, my uncle's been captured by earthbenders. Yeah.
And what was the other question? I don't remember if there was another question.
Uncle, that's what
Well,
dogs
no,
eat.
you pretty much covered it, Johnny. And before we get into any specifics, I want to pose the same question to Andrew. Andrew, man.
Well, I'm pretty sure I started watching it when it premiered because I remember being young and watching it on TV as it aired, being like, the show's so cool. I mean, I was already into that kind of stuff. Like I said, like Dynasty Warriors was already my jam. Like Dynasty Warriors was doing that kind of thing. Obviously, nowhere near as cool as a video game where you just like fight a million faceless enemies like every level. But I, for some reason, I don't know why, I can't remember why, but I never watched the third season when it was on TV. I watched the first 2 seasons just over and over again. Like I watched reruns, and I had like the first 10 episodes of season 1 on DVD, and I just never saw the third season. And then I feel like the finale of season 3 was on TV, and I was like, well, I'm not going to watch that if I haven't seen the season. I don't want to ruin it. And then I just never watched it. And then now that it's back on Netflix, I got to season 3, and I was like, holy shit, I never watched the third season. So the third season was brand new to me when I watched it like a few months ago, but before that I was already super into it. I even played.
I'm so envious of that.
Yeah, right?
Dude, it was
God.
It was
Oh
so
my God.
crazy.
Your first time.
So my question for you, Andrew, is: did you go through this whole time thinking that you had seen the entirety of the show, or did you always know there was a portion of it that you hadn't seen?
I knew that I never watched the whole finale, and I knew I never finished season 3. But but then when I was rewatching the whole show and got to season 3, I was like, I haven't seen any of these episodes. I think the only episode I saw was the Fire Emblem, the Ember Island players. I think that's the only
worst
one I saw.
episode of that season, end of the show.
Whoa,
Dumb. Okay,
dumb.
aside from
Shut
the Great
up.
Divide. But
Chris,
no,
can I just say
that's-
2 more
screw you,
things?
this is my
before we move
podcast.
on?
What the hell are you talking about? Telling me to
We're
shut
talking
up.
about a TV show, movie nerd.
I
What
wanna
is the
hear
name
what
of this
Johnny
goddamn
thinks.
podcast? Exactly.
Talk-
Can I just say 2
TV.
things before we
Sure,
move on?
Johnny,
Go
what
ahead.
were you?
Johnny,
Yeah.
I will allow you to speak.
I just checked, and it's actually Winter Solstice Part 1, which is in season 1 when Iroh gets captured. It was not season 2.
Oh,
And
thank you.
The second thing I had to say was
Thank you very much.
that I forgot to say is I actually had a stuffed Momo doll, and I wish I had that like with me right now. I'm pretty sure it's not at this house that I'm currently at, but I had a stuffed Momo like as a child, and I just remembered that. It's pretty funny. Good time.
That's
Wow.
sick.
I'm actually really glad you added it in. That's really cool. I love, like Luke said, I love the animals. I love like the sort of environment of the show. It's a really
Dude,
cool.
and when
space
they
to
have
get
that one
engulfed
episode
inside of.
when they're in Ba Sing Se and they're like, yeah, and the king's having a party for his pet bear, and you're like,
And
oh,
they're
you
like,
mean
oh, yeah.
platypus
Bear.
Platypus bear.
And he's like,
And they just
no,
put like every other
it
bear
just says
size animal
bear.
combo.
No.
And it's like,
Yeah.
no, it's just a bear.
His
Like,
stuff's
that
bear.
was
a
weird.
great little bit.
That was good awareness. But before we get into something specific, I kind of started off by divulging my relationship with Avatar, but we haven't heard from the movie nerd
the
himself.
co-host of the show, who, thank God, I know a lot of people will probably be grateful for this, but I've barely gotten a word in so far. But that's okay. I like that because I like that when I have a lot of guests. But yeah, my earliest memories of Avatar, I remember my babysitter when I was younger. She was really into that show, and I think I like walked in on one day when she was like watching it, and I'm like, oh, this looks cool, and she showed it to me and my brothers. And I always thought it was
Andrew's
fun.
face.
Oh man,
There's worse
I
things
was
to walk in
waiting.
on.
I was waiting.
There's
Somebody was
worse
gonna.
things to walk in on.
Dude,
just saying,
somebody
you know,
was
I've
gonna
never
have
walked
that-
in on a babysitter before. I don't
Somebody
know.
was gonna have that reaction. I just needed to get it out of the way. Just rip that band-aid right off. So I remember I'm like, this is pretty cool. And it was another show that I watched with my brothers. I watched a lot of cartoon shows with my brothers. It really became that and the Clone Wars. But as I got older, it was one of those shows that it was one of the things I kind of like watched consistently without like watching like every episode back to back. But every episode that I saw kind of reaffirmed and just made the show cooler for me. And it wasn't until I think I was about in high school, which is when I realized, oh no, this show's fucking incredible and like one of the greatest shows ever made. And it was weird because Andrew, I'm actually really happy that you brought up the whole thing with the third season because I still watched the third season, but it was really weird because I was aware of the first 2 seasons when they were on TV on Nickelodeon back in the day, but for whatever reason, I was never aware of the third season when it was actually
Same.
on until it was over. I don't know what it was about that. I remember seeing the commercials for the third season and the way that they made the trailers for the end of season 2. I was like, wait, did Aang die? Holy shit, did they actually do that? But they didn't. And then I remember the first thing with the trailer of season 3 is I'm like, whoa, Aang has hair. Holy crap.
I know,
They were
dude.
doing something.
And then when the
movie
season
so
3 finale happens, they just like it was like every other commercial was like Avatar's ending, and I was like, wait, what?
What?
So just
So
I
where
actually
have I
have the answer to
been?
this. So I did some research. I was reading an article in preparation for this episode, and the creators actually had 17 more seasons of this show planned, but they couldn't get along with the studio. So they cut it off after 3. No, I'm just kidding.
7.
I was like,
I don't believe
I believed you. I believed you
I was
until you
like-
said 17.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
was
The
like,
way
that's,
They
was
did
like,
have more
no.
seasons planned.
yeah, they did have more
It's actually
seasons
I
planned,
would
and it just
believe
wasn't meant to
Chris-
be with Nickelodeon. But so that's
Right.
kind of
Well,
why
I
that
believe
happened.
Chris because he was
So-
spark noting information about Avatar, but when I got on the call with him,
Yeah,
It's
he
actually
was watching
probably-
videos like spark
Listen.
noting Avatar information.
listen, however you get the information, as long as you get it.
As long as
It's pretty
like,
interesting actually because
Wait,
I do remember. Sorry.
Johnny,
Sorry,
speak,
John.
Andrew.
Johnny,
This
what's
is
up?
I
your
didn't
podcast.
listen. There's a delay, Dom. Go ahead,
There is
Johnny.
a delay, yeah.
I was just gonna say I do remember when at least parts of season 3 were airing. Like I remember watching the Day of Black Sun invasion. I made my dad watch it with me actually, which was pretty funny because he
Love
had
Day
no
of
idea
Black
what
Sun.
the show was about, and I was just like, "Hey, this special episode for a show I really like is coming on tonight. If you want to watch it," and he probably like just had no idea what was going on. But then I'm pretty
Probably
sure they
just
took a
like to
break.
hang out with you.
No, I'm pretty sure they took a break after the Day of Black Sun, and then I remember from the Western Air Temple all the way up until I believe, what's the episode called where they find the guy who killed Guitar's dad? I don't
Southern
remember what it's
Raider.
called for the Southern Raiders. Yeah, I'm pretty sure
Yeah,
those.
Southern
I
Raider.
believe that's 7 episodes. They aired like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Like they aired them for the first time like back to back, like
Back-to-back.
one day at a time.
Oh,
a whole-
wow.
I'm pretty sure. I could be wrong about that, but that's how I remember it. And then I remember the day of the Sozin's Comet
Sozin's
happened
Comet,
like
yeah.
a while after
Dude, that's
that.
4
Yeah.
episodes.
I just wanted to
Yeah,
bring that
dude,
up because we were talking about season
question
3.
is, though,
I have a
Did-
question.
Did they split up the 2-parter episodes though into different parts, or did they air the 2-parters on the same day? Because Netflix did that weird thing where they cobbled all the 2-parters in season 3 and 2 together, and it really threw me off. So I'm like, wait a minute,
Yeah, I
season
don't
3
like-
had 21 episodes. Why the
I
hell
don't
is it
like
now
that.
16?
Yeah, then you go to
I'm pretty
Sozin's Comet.
sure
It's like it's
bro,
an
it's-
hour and a half long episode.
Hour and a
It's
half
like, shut
movie. I'm
up.
like, dude, come on.
Nah.
I know
really
the Day of
fucked my
Black Sun
watching
aired
schedule.
all at once, but the Boiling Rock, I'm pretty sure they aired one part on one day and then one part the next day.
Yeah,
I'm pretty
I
sure.
also am pretty sure the Boiling Rock was like that.
All right.
I honestly that
Mhm.
episode, like I was up and down about that one, like how I feel. I never really like dove head first into that one because honestly, I don't really give a shit about Sokka's like
Whoa.
Master.
Okay,
he finds his
dude.
dad and then like it's like his dad's like, "Great job, Sokka. Now do all my work."
Whoa.
Yeah, that's well. Look, we'll get into characters and
Okay.
madness in a little bit.
Hold
right
on.
Here,
I
but
have a
so-
question.
Oh boy.
Did anyone here watch The Legend of Korra?
Yes, I'm halfway
Not
through
yet.
it right now.
Yes.
Halfway through it. Johnny, did you watch all of it?
Yes, I watched the whole thing.
Luke, what did you say?
I have all 4 seasons on DVD. I bought them individually to watch them
right,
because I was so
Avengers-
psyched.
Because
Oh,
I finished it a few weeks ago. I just wanted to know where everyone was at. in
I'm
Korra.
starting the first episode after we wrap this episode up
Yeah,
tonight.
that's good.
Not
That's
that
gonna
we're
be
anywhere
interesting.
near close to that, but
I already
that's my
told
plan.
Chris that I was going to be really
Nice.
interested to see his opinion on this. But so, guys, if we could kind of just jump ship it now, actually, like, so those are kind of our origin stories individually with the show. But now I guess we can start to open it up to like the freeform panel, which is, and I'm just going to launch this off. What
Call
is
me
it
Avatar,
that makes
man.
this goddamn show so special? Like we talked about like a couple different things now. Obviously, the setting, the characters are great, the sense of lore is great, like the different allusions to different forms of Asian culture, and like how that's really concentrated, like the type of bending and how that's like an expression of free will. It was also, I feel like it was also groundbreaking in the sense that like it was a kid show that even before Clone Wars was like not afraid to actually be mature and have some really mature and introspective themes and life lessons. Like it incorporated a lot of stuff from philosophy, which had its origins in Asia.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can I start?
can.
I like what you said about like it being like kind of a mature setting for that. I think like you see the progression of sort of cartoons having a very positive sort of slow drop into like maturity, and I think that was a very important step. I don't think we perfected it until we got to Steven Universe, which is like a whole different like kettle of fish, but I think like it was very important to have steps about like death, about like found family was very important, even in like Iroh and Zuko, because technically like they're blood relatives, but you really, I mean, from the first episode, like based on like Uncle's demeanor, he's just really kind of jolly, and he's like, oh, like I'm gonna be the wise uncle, and like you don't really expect this sort of found family that happens there because you're going into it with their already family, and then you see that bond sort of strengthened in a way that isn't like a nuclear family member. So I think that's really important. A really important theme and like mature concept that got pushed forward kind of hard. And obviously you need to have seen the full scope of the series to understand like kind of the development of that and the redemption and stuff. But I mean, you know, kids are old enough that like they can understand a lot more than we give them credit for. So I think like Avatar was special, or at least this is my argument for it, was special because it introduced a way to like give children adult concepts in a subtle, like contextual way that they can understand that like, as cartoons developed over the last like 10-15 years, Adventure Time, regular show, Steven Universe, you really see like they no holds barred anymore. They're like, this is a same-sex relationship and this is an abusive relationship and this is like the best way to get out of it. And it's like
Gravity Falls,
really
I think, was another good example of that.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting because it's funny because we're so inundated with so much mature and groundbreaking cartoon content now that we take it for granted, but we forget back in the day that like just how groundbreaking and like boundary pushing this show among a lot of other shows were. But
we had Johnny Bravo. He was the sexiest guy.
That's what I was about to say. That's not so.
I don't know if I would call that an adult theme or mature theme or necessarily. But
I'm saying that before that it was just backing it.
That was the 90s. That was a whole different time.
I think going off of what Luke said though about like Avatar not being afraid to show like adult things like death and found family and struggles and all that stuff. I think it was cool that like obviously the main characters were all children. Like Sokka was the oldest one. He was what, like 15 or something, 16, 14,
16,
something.
I think. I don't remember specifically.
Sometimes I
think Zuko would be the oldest, right?
Yeah, because actually no, because Zuko was like 16, Sokka was younger than him. So
either way, 16, like you're not old by any means. You're extremely young still. So first of all, you can relate to all these kids because you were a kid watching it. But also, I think it was smart in like. Not every show that's like funny and serious gets this right. Like I think Scrubs is one of the shows that gets this right, where like when it's funny, it's so funny, but when they get serious and like it's like an intense, serious moment, like there's no joke. Like like they want you to know exactly. They want you to know like this is serious. Like when Aang is like fighting somebody to save someone innocent or save Katara, there's never in the middle like, wow, that was a hot fireball. Like,
when he
it's
freaks
always
out at
just
the temple.
it's always just fights. It's just like
gonna bring
serious until like there's only jokes in, you know, like downbeats and chill moments.
Is consistent. And even though they balance different types of tones, they don't pull you out of it. Like, for example, one of my most hated moments in cinematic history is in the opening of The Force Awakens when Kylo Ren holds the bullet in the air and Poe Dameron says, do I speak? Do you speak? You know what I'm talking about? Like, that just takes you out of the moment. Takes you out of the moment. You can have both.
Yeah,
and Avatar is a great example of how you can have both.
You out.
Yeah, definitely. And the funny thing too is that like it kind of did have those moments like when you first introduce Aang and Aang's first introducing Zuko, like he's being like still joyful and like playful with his fight techniques, but also like when he throws down, he has to throw down, and like also in terms of just getting you right into the emotional maturity right off the bat, like the third episode of the whole show is basically a reinforcement of Aang's entire everything that he has known has been completely wiped off the earth, and there is nothing that and it is all
it's
his
like, it's like you already know the show is called The Last Airbender, but let me explain to you what that means visually until you cry. But also it's like
I'd like to argue that the show cheats out and makes jokes all the time.
It does, but not in a cheap
Let me tell you why. Luke, I'm about to get to that.
Yeah.
The reason why, like, they had it, I don't know if it was all, like, pre-planned or what, but, like, it's so perfect that they were all kids because, like, obviously kids are goofy no matter what. Like, kids don't always grasp how serious things are, or they forget, or they're just still lighthearted or innocent or whatever. So it was perfect that all of the cast were kids so that even though they're doing, you know, they're literally saving the world, they're ending, like, a racist war, basically. And like throughout all that, they can still be funny, and like you don't feel weird laughing with them because they're all kids. So they're still like just kids hanging out in between the saving the world stuff. So it's like it never feels wrong. Like everything is genuine, basically, because they're kids.
You never lose that sense of childlike wonder, which is something that
Instead of like in weird movies or TV shows when everyone's a grown up and they're like trying to save the world, but at the same time these two grown ups are like flirting and like being playful. And you're like
every CW show ever made.
And you're like, do you guys know where you are right now? Like you guys are grown.
Well, they're thrown into like a political system too. You know, we're saying that they're saving the world, and like on a spiritual level, that's exactly what his job is. But like in all honesty, his solution may be a spiritual thing, but the conflict is 100% political and, like you said, racial.
Well, yeah.
Like 100% about domination, and that's politicized. So then you're putting somebody whose like role is to be neutral for the world into a position where they have to make decisions for every other nation, even if that nation doesn't want them to speak for them,
and force him to take an active part. Which, besides the fact that goes kind of against everything that he as a character has grown up learning. Because he's a pacifist, obviously because of the whole air nomad culture. But also, it's crazy because what the other brilliant thing the show does, besides obviously fleshing out every single character to the point where even its antagonists don't feel like antagonists until you're reminded that these are the bad guys and they will kill you. Is the fact that like when they go, because this show is so layered that even when it goes into the backstory and explains the origin of the war and how it started in terms of like breaking down the different cultures and divides, even that one you can understand kind of where they were coming from. It's just like to me, like the brilliant thing that this show does with its characters is breaking them down and turning each and every one of them into human beings with their own motivations and goals. Like it's a cartoon show with gray characters, which is insane to me, especially for the time period that this came out.
And plot hole aside, that's a great episode.
And let me just add to like. I do agree with that. And let me just add to like kind of the sentiment you guys are saying, because one of the things that I also think makes it so enjoyable to watch as someone who came at it as a 26-year-old is the innocence of Aang as a child who was thrown into this position that he didn't ask for, but he sort of fell into, just makes this whole like struggle of, it is a racist war and he has big shoes to fill, but he's also still a kid. And the way that they sort of navigate that in this intense world that you obviously come to love is just, it's brilliant. It fires on all cylinders. It really is a show that I think I would have enjoyed just as much as I did watching it at 26 as I would have if I would have really tuned in when I was like 11, 10, whenever this thing was airing, and I was like the target audience for it, but in a way I'm almost glad I got to sort of get like this like 2020 vision on it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because it's so brilliant to see.
Johnny said something to me. Johnny and I were talking about this this is probably months ago now, but we were talking when he was rewatching, and he said about like season 1, it's like you see like he's so like there's so many childish jokes that like as an adult like it's kind of hard to watch that now because
I wanted to bring up something about that.
And I think like I could see your reaction. I think because a lot of that like justification for that is that like as you know they go on and they develop and they obviously become more mature, you also realize that like he sees himself as a kid first, then an air nomad, then the avatar, like whereas the world sees him as you're the avatar and you're nothing else. Like you have to be this thing because there's always been this thing and we need it. Where his position is, I do all these goofy things and make all these stupid jokes because I want to be a kid first. I don't want to be the avatar first.
Right.
So, Johnny, I don't know what you were gonna.
One thing that I thought was we touched on a bunch of different subjects, or you guys did, but I disagree with the idea. I think the show does a great job in splitting up the jokes and the seriousness, but I disagree that they always do it. And just the one example that I will cite is the airship birthday party in the finale right before they burn down the entire
dude.
All right, one of the best shows. Hold on.
That's the best moment.
No. Johnny's got a point.
All right. Well, I'm not saying that isn't funny. It's pretty funny, but the idea that isn't taking the audience away from the fact that they're about to burn down an entire civilization, killing millions of animals and presumably millions of people too. Like it's
people.
I agree that it's funny, but also one thing that I was going to say about the idea of what made the show so good, and I'm actually curious as to like what you guys think of if this would have been like on purpose or by accident, because I'm actually not really sure, but I kind of agree with the idea that season 1 especially is probably has the most like childish jokes, at least especially like the first half. And I kind of think that was maybe like right place, right time for the sake of the show, in the sense of everyone who was like really young watching the show for the first time and getting sucked in, and maybe because of like a lot of the kids jokes, and then they're already enveloped and like enthralled in all the characters by the time it gets really deep. So then they're already along for the ride. So it didn't start off really deep and really serious. So the fact that it like started off more lighthearted, kind of to weed the kids in first, and then,
Johnny,
it kind of dropped and got super heavy.
I'm actually
on
really
them.
glad that you brought that up because
wait, hold on. I gotta say one thing about this birthday party thing that Johnny's having a problem with. All
I didn't
I'm
have a
gonna
problem
say,
with it. I just said
listen,
it's not.
oh
it
my
is an
God.
example of you getting taken away from the show.
Okay, well,
From the
it seems like
seriousness,
you had,
not
it
from the
seems
show.
like you had a problem with it because you're saying
I said it was funny.
It was poorly executed.
It's like the
is what it
jet
sounds like
under
you're
a
saying.
rock thing.
Anyway,
I'm with Andrew on this one, Johnny. That joke is
Listen to me.
amazing.
I didn't say it wasn't a good joke.
Listen, what
Oh my
that scene
God.
really does, besides make you laugh your pants off, is remind you that not everyone that's a Fire Nation soldier is just like the Fire Nation, Fire Lord Ozai. They're just like, well, this is my job, blah blah blah. You know, like
That's
so.
fair.
Like they all get gathered.
Yeah,
They all get gathered
exactly.
together for the first time, literally ever, and they're like, "What's going on?" This dude is like, "I mean, it is my birthday," and he's like, "Dude, this has to be what it's
And
for."
I can't believe
So
they
it's
can't
all
remember my birthday.
Like I said, it's all genuine. Like, why wouldn't you think that you're just getting a birthday party when
Yeah.
you've never been
Cherry on
gathered
top.
When they're
together?
about to
cherry
bring
on
down the
top of
Earth
that
Kingdom,
joke.
why would they think they're about to celebrate a birthday? Why would they think that they're calling
They
down
had
all the
time,
Fire
Johnny.
Benders
They were
about to-
waiting. They were getting
God,
there. They
guys,
weren't
this-
doing anything.
no.
Well, let me just
I'm
get
not
this a
saying
little
it wasn't
rounded.
funny.
Let me root this
I
in a
agree,
little.
Johnny, that there are
That's gonna come
moments
down
where
to we're
jokes
gonna
come
argue
in and
about
it
one
takes away
joke at the
from
finale.
I'm not
Make or
saying that
break
ruins
of
the
the
show.
show.
I'm not saying that ruins the show at all. It's my favorite. It's maybe my favorite show ever. I'm just saying that things like that do take you out of the severity of the moment.
Let me just root this in
I
a little,
agree
and
with
I want to
Johnny.
get everyone's take on this next because I think what this show kind of I can't really say if it does this well because shows sort of, as we all know, find their voice as they go on and they progress through seasons. So what started off as a very off-putting first 8 episodes for me, I'm going to be very honest, it was very kiddie. I had to get used to the voice actors being of an age that I typically don't get from my animated shows. They're a little more older, a little more mature. It was a little hard for me to get into, quickly turned into this, okay, so as the show progresses, the characters progress and they get older and they seek romance and they seek normalcy in these positions that obviously they were thrust into that aren't normal for any kid to be in. So to watch them circumnavigate this, it becomes brilliant, but it does start off a little rough and a little off-putting, but I think it serves a purpose to get to a climax there. So I want to kind of get your guys' take on that.
I have an answer for that. It's the Clone Wars syndrome all over again. It was the exact same thing that the Clone Wars did, which is the Clone Wars started off relatively fun and kiddie and got you into all these like crazy different worlds. And then as time went on and as you went along with these characters, they were able to slowly and subtly pull you in and have you mature. And then that way, when they did put the characters in these much deeper and darker, more dangerous situations, the stakes got higher, they got way heavier, stuff got a lot sadder, a lot of characters started dropping dead out of nowhere. You were able to go along with that because you had that first season with all of that kiddie stuff in order to enwrap you in. It works for kids, and even though us as adults might be more willing to write that off, to me, even though to me the first season is still the weakest by default, it is like to me like without it, like the show does not have the magic that it has, and which
I think we need a sense of scale for this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Like
because we're talking about this show like it made no mistakes. Like we can't be talking about it like that because
definitely not.
It's a show that
Nightmare and Daydreams
they went into
is an
dark
episode.
things.
Dude, Nightmare and Daydream. Talk about all the episodes
it's a
between
cartoon. It's not Game of Thrones.
all the
That
episodes
episode has
between
the best
Blue
fight in
Spirit
the
and the
whole
finale
series.
of season 1.
Nightmares and Daydreams has the greatest fight in the whole series. No cap.
Oh, Fire
Momo
Lord
versus
Ozai.
Appa. Let's
It
go.
is you who are not wearing pants.
Yeah, that is a 16.
Great. That's
Listen,
like
a great.
all I'm
great
saying is-
series.
all I'm
It's a
saying
stupid
is-
episode,
Right
but-
before,
not
right
even
before
my
potentially
opinion.
the biggest.
That's not even my opinion. Nickelodeon said that. Go watch their top battles of Avatar. That's the #1 battle, and it's facts. So you can't even argue it.
But
Chris,
yeah,
what was
no,
the
Luke,
question?
what would
I
you?
gotta argue with it.
Luke, what were you sort of? We'll go around here. We'll go to Andrew and Johnny next. What were you sort of saying about because we were talking about Johnny raised a good point about sort of how the show sort of like as the characters grow up and this is how I interpret it. You sort of grow with the show and the situations they're brought in grow with it. And it's not a perfect show, but sort of growing up's not perfect. So that's why I give the show a lot of forgiveness as an animated show. But you were kind of getting on to something there that I would like to hear the rest of if you've gotten it back with my description
about it being like a predatory world, like it being like a different kind of world. Because,
yeah, exactly.
I mean, I think we're looking at them as children, we're looking at them as like, he's like what, 12 when he comes out of the iceberg.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, we expect like on a scientific and like hormonal level, like he's, you know, obviously going to go through specific like bodily changes. But the thing is, like, we're gauging like what they should be capable of doing, what they should know, what like they should be subject to, like what kind of violence they should be subject to. And it's a different world that's far more predatory. People have the ability to eject fire from their hands. It's like if you grew up and as a baby, everyone you knew who was 6 had a gun. Like you probably wouldn't be as afraid of it because everybody had one, but also everybody is capable of mowing you down on the corner. Like, so you either get tough with it early, or like, I guess I'm not trying to jump into gun violence. I was just saying it's like, it's an easily accessible violent thing that a majority of people could have. Right. And then now think about the people like Sako who like do not have these abilities. Like, you have to think at such a higher advanced level because you're not privileged to have this power. Like, so we expect them to be, oh, he's 15 years old. Like, okay. And he's also living in a world with no technology and people have godlike powers around him and he doesn't. So like, what we expect him to be able to handle is not what, you know, the reality of that context. So I think you I do a lot of critical analysis, and like this makes sense to me that like we need to look at everything we talk about contextually because they are minors. Like, it's like Harry Potter. Like, Harry Potter was what, 10? Like, but he was 11, doing crazy violent things and no one cared because everybody had magic, so who fucking cares? Like, it's just a kid dealing with magic. It's just airbenders dealing with genocide. Like,
that's kind of a thing that happens in like every anime show.
Well, but again,
like main cast is like 12.
No, but that's the thing that I'm actually glad that you brought that up, because the whole thing, and one of the things about the show was like that you'd seen a couple Cartoon Network's shows at the time doing this, but to me, I feel like this was the big show. And you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, because I'm not an anime fan at all. So, Andrew, this will be your spot to jump in here. I'm pretty sure that this is the first. Total Drama Island. My thoughts on that show aside, I do love that show. But
Dexter's Lab, dude, he could have taken over the world.
This is the first show that to me brought the anime style of like, and using that animation style in mainstream cartoons that brought that to the mainstream.
Let me ask you,
Samurai Jack, but yeah.
Well,
Samurai Jack wasn't as widely watched.
Let me ask this, because I actually don't know the answer. Did Teen Titans come out before Avatar: The Last Airbender?
Yes, but I don't know how popular it was when it first started.
Because Teen Titans is anime AF, and I'm going to die on the hill that Avatar and Teen Titans are... Actually, not Teen Titans, because that's like a weird comic book difference. But Avatar's anime, dude. I'm dying on that hill. Come see me outside. I'll fight to the death over that.
Right, but in a way, it almost kind of jump-started this new genre of like American anime, you know? Because like you guys are all much bigger anime fans than I can. You guys can all like talk much more intelligently about this than I can. But like, because the whole thing to me about anime is the idea that anime has always been an animation style that is clearly, thank you, but has not been afraid to dive into a lot more mature themes that like traditional American cartoons were, you know?
Because I feel like it's based in Japanese culture, though. Like,
exactly.
We call it anime not because it's animated. That's not the term. That's like saying like we call comics like the comic strip in a newspaper. That's a comic. Like, you don't think of it like that. We don't think of anime being Americanized. So like, it is set in Japanese culture where so many different ideals and values are held.
But also at the same time. But at the same time, like, now there's so many animes. Is the correct plural anime? Animes? I don't even know.
I think it's one of those like singular anime word, like deer.
I'm gonna say animes. And there's so many out there now. There's so many out there now that there's one for everybody. Like, there's like
Johnny, what's
Chris
your
has
favorite
seen
anime?
like Your Lie in April. It's just about like kids that are musicians. There's Dragon Ball Z that are about, you know, like alien superheroes. There's one called Detroit Metal City that's literally about a kid who loves pop music who gets put into this like crazy metal band that just sings about killing your parents, but he like is conflicted. Like, there's literally an anime about anything.
Don Tapper's on.
There's one where the devil is working at a McDonald's. Like, there's an anime for anything. So I don't think that necessarily now that every anime is like, oh, mature themes and all this and that.
The one made out of like
but I feel like the point being is when it was a lot more niche. The point being that when it was a lot more niche, it did have its roots in much more mature themes and a lot of kind of traditionalist American anime style.
All you
wanna
need to
dive
know
down
about
the,
that is you would just need to see how they censored American anime just to show you how mature anime was.
Yeah, I don't
Right.
think you would have Avatar. I don't think you would have Samurai Jack. I don't think you would have Teen Titans if you didn't have Toonami on Cartoon Network, sort of bringing that to us as young American kids. That was very influential to me. But with that being said,
Shout out
there's clear differences, like Luke said, culturally. There are clear cultural differences in the way that, like, when Naruto addresses his masters, sometimes Aang has lip, whereas Naruto has lip, but when he gets older and he gets more mature, there's a respect there. And I think that's like the cultural difference. So that's why if I was going to put anime to Avatar, I'd call it American anime at the very most. To me, I just think it's a great American cartoon because to me, it feels like a beautiful homage from some American creators who really, like Luke said, appreciate and respect Asian culture.
Right. To me, it's like anime is
and
more
also
like
that one of the co-creators is Asian, so
right. To me, it's more like anime is just like, I feel like the definition is like the style of like animation and storytelling, and to me, it's like the anime thing is essentially like they can do so many different like tones, I guess, in one episode. Like you'll be watching like Naruto's a good example because like you'll have one scene where they're just like walking through town and they're just like ha 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 cracking jokes, and sometimes like someone will get embarrassed and then like that character will shrink on screen and they'll be like, oh, this is a cartoon and we're looking goofy, but then like 10 minutes later like true. Some assassin jumps into the town and is about to kill somebody and it's just whoosh, and then it's like crazy supernatural action, and it's like there's
a lot of meta art.
Right, exactly.
Right.
And because like Avatar does that, like when they do like goofy shit, like their eyes get giant or something like that. Like, and it does that, and Teen Titans does that a lot too. Like that is what I feel like is the anime part of it.
Right, absolutely.
I don't think it breaks immersion though, which is
no, it doesn't.
Absolutely
Not
break to that.
If anything,
you're still always watching a
that's
cartoon,
the difference, right?
Sorry. Regardless, though, before we stray too far from what the show is about today, Avatar is a great show, and it's brilliantly borrows from so many different styles and so many different, bags, if you will. But the thing to me that I kind of wanted to speak about with you guys, and I know Johnny may have to jump out of here early, so I want to let him sort of take the reins on this, and then we can do like a little reverse circle thing here. Like, although anime does have character progression and character growth, it usually is over like the course of 300 episodes. So to see how this show in 61 episodes, I believe it is, just you see a completely different Aang, a completely different Sokka, Zuko, Katara, even Toph, who comes in on season 2, to the end of season 3, like they're almost grown adults at this point, they're ready to take on their 20s. And so like, Johnny, like what's your like sort of take on their progression and their growth in this show? And like, are you for it? Are you against it? Like, what's your take on all that?
Well, I think
Zuko in
it's
particular.
Definitely obvious that at the very least that every character gets more competent at what they do. Like by the end of the show, even Sokka, who can't bend at all, and I think that like that makes sense like for the show just to do that. I do think it's funny that they didn't have the Sokka's master episode until like halfway through season 3. Like when Aang was like the giant moon spirit, Sokka wasn't like, why can't I do that? Like it took him until there was like a forest fire in season 3.
That was the 4th episode of the 3rd season.
But, and then like 4 episodes later, yeah, exactly, the sword's gone. It's like Sokka can't catch it.
4 episodes, yeah.
I think that every character goes through that baseline transformation of just becoming just more competent at what they do, and then I think there's the more iconic transformations, like obviously the Zuko transformation, the Iroh. I kind of think Iroh's transformation is maybe like one of the more like not so obvious ones in the sense of him just getting to realize his destiny that he always was basically striving for throughout the entire show, of just wanting to take back Ba Sing Se, but in the name of the White Lotus and not in the name of the Fire Nation anymore. So I thought that was just a cool progression, because I feel like the uncle at the end of the show, or the uncle at the beginning of the show, wouldn't potentially.
Ooh,
it's like an interesting theory. It's interesting with me, like imagining if the entire show the uncle was planning on taking back Ba Sing Se in the name of the White Lotus, and that his subplot is gathering the White Lotus like together throughout the whole show. That's just like one thing that's just super interesting.
Don't get my brain working that way.
He's in that one shop that they let him in, right? Don't they do that?
Yeah, right.
I mean, I don't know. I think that was the whole thing. Like Ba Sing Se was like this driving force the entire show, but for sure it was an important moment.
I would like to say
like
his character.
Let me just say this though. I didn't even consider the fact, and it's, I mean, I watched it, but like that's awesome that you kind of just made me realize like the kids aren't the only ones having growth in this show.
Right. Yeah,
no,
every character
very well woven show.
has an arc on this show,
also,
for good or for bad.
I just want to say, Zuko alone, I think, is a top 3 episode.
Yeah, I agree with that.
God.
That's
so good. Yeah,
that's like one of the best episodes they've made.
I think it's too bold to say it's the best episode, but I would say probably top 3 or top 4.
Yeah,
it's up there though. Definitely.
Easily top 300.
Easily.
Out of a show that only had 61 episodes.
Easily.
Johnny's talking about like him taking back Bossing Say, which is like obviously like a big black mark like on his record. Is that like like he
arguably the event that first like just set him off on this journey. If you really think about it,
I did see this is where I disagree with that. I think the entire reason that he goes off the whole time and his whole development is based solely around the fact that he failed to be a father. He goes with
no, that's what I'm saying.
But it's even more. But it's even more than that.
Yeah, but like, I mean, it's very clear from the get-go that like once you
is learning, his whole development is learning like that. It's not like that he just needs to be there all the time for Zuko, and because he hovers a little bit in the beginning.
His son died because he was overly imperialistic.
Right,
and well, so like he turns that around and is like kind of overbearing over Zuko, and that pushes him away. And then he's, I'm gonna go off and get, he runs after Aang himself at the was it the South or the North Pole?
North Pole.
The North Pole. So like he gets pushed away by Iroh because Iroh is just being very overbearing in trying to like fix his mistake of not like protecting his own son enough. And then I think like Johnny's right, like when he gets to that like taking back Bossing Say thing, it's like that comes right after he has the scene with Zuko in the tent, which is weird as fuck. He just sits there and watches him sleep. Like that's so weird.
And then he goes and fights his sister, like without getting any sleep.
Yeah, right.
What a weird turn of events.
But I mean, you got to assume that he got some sleep when they were on Appa, because it's a long flight from Bossing Say all the way to the Fire Nation.
They weren't on Appa though. They were on that. Wait, yes, they were. Sorry.
Yes, they were on Appa.
I was thinking of whatever that other creature was called.
Yeah, the lizard one,
Sokka,
Toph, and Suki.
The eel hound.
Yeah, that. Yeah, see, you guys know the animals better than me. But yeah, you guys brought up a good point though about the character development, because the whole thing is that because the whole point is that Iroh's jumping point is from the fact that he lost his son, and he very clearly sees Zuko as the son that he lost, and he kind of sees Zuko as a means to fix what he couldn't do with his son that died at Bossing Say. Lutan, I think is his name.
I'm sorry. Before you move on from this, Tom, I'm just imagining Zuko and Katara on their way to go fight Azula, and Zuko's just like, "Sorry, Katara, I just need to shut my eyes for a little bit." I stayed up all night watching my uncle sleep.
I coming up ahead of me. Gotta clock
my uncle sleep.
No, but going back to Iroh though, like his whole thing, obviously through the whole show, is he's the wise one that gives wisdom. Like even when he's traveling and he runs into Toph, like he gives Toph wisdom. He literally gives everybody wisdom. When he and Aang are walking through the tunnels, he gives him wisdom. Every time he's giving out wisdom. But the only reason he's that wise is because of all the shit that he's gone through. Like he gives Zuko all this advice that he wishes he could have given to Lu Ten, but he obviously couldn't for a bunch of reasons. Big one is that he died, but also probably while he was alive, he was, being General Iroh and all that. But then even when he's like talking to Toph or talking to just random people, like even in his, the Tales of Bossing Say, which like is also one of the greatest episodes of all time, like his story he's given, like even the guy that tries to mug him, like he gives him advice. And all of these things that he's learned, it's just because his life has just been shit until he was like, you know what? I literally was living life wrong my entire life. My son is dead. That's all that matters to me. I don't give a shit that I'm a disgrace for not capturing Bossing Say. Like
being a typical power hungry evil firebender.
Right, exactly. And that's why like the whole
good
show
guy,
is just like, Zuko, chill out, dude. Like I wish I could just tell you that I have it figured out, but then you won't believe me. So like
I mentioned this
good Gyro.
I mentioned this in my top 10 Avatar characters, which is the idea of, obviously, even though, and again, like just going back to the idea that there is not a single character in this show who doesn't get any sort of development. I mentioned that the idea of having Iroh and Zuko as your focused firebender characters rather than just having them be traditional antagonists, I think is what helped give the show that extra sense of legitimacy first and foremost, because those two characters showed right off the bat that besides the fact of, not every firebender is necessarily bad, even though these are the bad guys. It showed that they were both like, even though Ira was kind of like more like the fun, jolly character who would obviously just throw out wisdom, and Zuko was very clearly like the angsty teen and everything. They showed right off the bat that like that these aren't, they may be the bad guys, but they're not bad people. And as you got to learn more about them, and then especially once they brought in the other firebenders who were the actual bad guys, it gives you just a whole new sense of just three-dimensional like kind of thought process about it that to me like I hadn't really seen from a cartoon show before, you know. And everything, it almost kind of makes you feel even more bad for when they do bring in the evil firebenders, like when they do bring in Azula in season 2, and then when you get into Ozai in the later seasons, it just makes you feel bad because you're like, wow, so we've been spending all this time with these firebenders who show that not only that they can be better than what they are, but are actually better off mentally and just overall for, you know, like you even say, like Zuko, once he actually learns how to properly firebend without relying on his airbending, when he learns that from the dragons, he is arguably a better firebender, like the best firebender that he's ever been. And it just makes you feel so sad that like you see all these firebenders and all these guys who appeared so so powerful and so dangerous at first, and now they just come off as like sad and pathetic because they're like, wow, you're doing all of this.
I don't know. I think Ozai is so one-dimensional.
What? Yeah. Well,
he is and he isn't.
I think the problem with Ozai is that all of his potentially interesting moments happen off screen and are told to us rather than being shown to us. And I do admit that's a problem.
That is true.
He's a bit more of a plot device than a character, in my opinion.
Ozai was never meant to really be a character the way that everyone else was. That was always kind of reserved for Azula.
Yeah, the only thing that like kept him in the game as like not being just like a total like snooze fest was because Mark Hamill acts his ass off voice acting him. Dude, and I just heard this amazing story today from Dante Bosco where the scene where they're talking about the Agni Kai, you know, where he speaks out and he's like, "Father, I'm sorry. Like, I didn't mean to speak out. You don't have to blast me in the face with a fireball."
But he does.
Like Dante Bosco like walks into the studio to do that, and normally like the whole cast is there, but to that day he was there by himself or something. So it was like a big empty room. And he's like, "All right, I'm looking through the script and blah blah. Oh, cool, doing Fire Lord Ozai stuff." It's like a pretty emotional scene with my dad. And then Mark Hamill walks in and he's like, "And I swear he was wearing all black." And I'm like, that's a weird detail to mention, but whatever. And he's like, "And we're doing the scene," and it's literally me going, "No, Father, I'm sorry." And he has to go, like, "Find your feelings." And then he's like, "No, Dad." And he's like, "I'm literally doing the Darth Vader Luke Skywalker scene, except I'm Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader." And I was like, whoa, that's crazy. So crazy. What a life moment to like have Luke Skywalker screaming at you being like, "No, son," and you're like, "But Dad."
Yeah, it's pretty
I got big Star Wars vibes actually with the central conflict, especially when Aang was very PO'd. And I think it was season 2 when Appa first gets taken and he sort of goes out into the desert and he like beats that little bee thing down. Bro. I instantly imagined Anakin riding out to give one to the Tusken Raiders. You guys remember that?
Yeah.
I was like, yo, don't fall. And it's a little sad because Filoni was off the show at that point in time.
Yeah.
I mean, he probably wasn't the only Star Wars fan in that office.
At that point, but
this is right in the aftermath of the prequels. Clone Wars is just getting going. So, you know.
I guess we should talk about that for a second. Is the fact that obviously, you know, we've made a lot of comparisons between Avatar and Star Wars, but like they are rooted because the fact is Dave Filoni, the creator of
World
War
Dom, can I just say,
I didn't even know that about Dave Filoni and Avatar.
And Dom, I am sorry I cut you off, but I do want to ask you this, Dom. Is that because they have a lot of similarities, or is that just because we're on Talking TV?
I think
and we have a whole month dedicated to Star Wars.
Both, but because we're
I don't think we've talked about it that much at all.
Star Wars, but that's just not.
I'm sorry, guys, but I have to go AFK at this point.
All right, Johnny. Well, we appreciate you being here, man.
We'll miss you. And
Make sure you talk about lots of Avatar
Johnny,
for me.
Rewatch that birthday party scene because I promise it's better than you remember.
Yeah, it's a special
Johnny,
moment.
I've seen that so many times. But
before you get out of here,
watch it again.
There's no lightning today.
Johnny, before you get out of here, let me just say we appreciate you giving us your time. We know you worked all day and you came on the show. And also, we're going to do a Legend of Korra episode with this panel. We're going to do a bad movie watch-along of the feature film. We're going to do a live-action
with everyone except for Luke because I refuse to watch it.
It's a movie. We'll know what you're talking about.
Yeah, we have a lot coming up, especially when Netflix drops this live-action thing. So Johnny will be back with more Avatar and other stuff in the future.
Legend of Korra again so that I can brush up on it. Thank you for having me for all
Johnny
that.
will be back with great Avatar content.
And I'll see you guys soon. We have really good conversation.
I love you, Johnny.
Bye, Johnny.
Bye, Johnny.
Good night, brother.
Say it back.
What?
And then there were 4.
And then there were 4. Now we really got the spill vibe going. What were we talking about?
Now
Tom,
can I
where are you
do
going
the
with all that?
intro?
Oh yeah, the Star Wars comparison. So yeah, it's the fact of Dave Filoni, the creator of the Clone Wars, Rebels, Star Wars Resistance, and The Mandalorian, directed almost every episode in that first season. And obviously, I mean, you have to assume like every epic grand scale story is gonna pull allusions from Star Wars because Star Wars is just like so present on everybody in that generation's mindset. You know,
mean the Bible? Everything is gonna pull allusion from the Bible.
Pretty much. Let's face it, Star Wars basically is the Bible at this point. Like let's not.
I
kid
meant like
ourselves.
literally the Bible, but
Oh, yeah,
All right,
but
let's
also
not
like
get
Joseph
philosophical
Campbell's
now.
hero's journey and everything. But like I do feel like
Yeah.
there is something to be said there because if you think about like the 3-act structure, what the hell? Come on. But if you think about like the 3-act structure of how Avatar is structured, it's like first season is almost like the Star Wars, you know, with like the big grand finale and of like that Star Wars. Then the second season is absolutely Empire Strikes Back with how it ends with the twist and everything, and with the good guys arguably getting dealt their biggest blow, and you see the fall of Ba Sing Se, which was like the last central stronghold before the Fire Nation officially really took over. And then in a way, almost season 3 to me does a better job of Return of the Jedi does, because to me the biggest I love Return of the Jedi. I don't think it's a bad movie, but I think the biggest miss that movie took is I don't think it did a good enough job of kind of reinforcing just how dire the situation was for the heroes. Because you start off with the mission to rescue Han, which is fun, and the next thing you know, it's just like they're right back to just we're just going on the next mission. You know, it's almost like everything that happened in the last movie just didn't happen. And to me, that's why I think that the reason why people come back to Return of the Jedi as being the weakest of the original Star Wars trilogy is because of that fact. And to me, like the only really interesting parts of that movie that do capitalize on
Are the Ewok.
of the first 2 movies
Dom,
are
you're talking a lot of conspiracy, so I just need to tell you that the Earth King has invited you to Lake Laogai.
Lake Lao guy. Oh God, I'm
I
sorry.
am obliged to accept.
That was actually kind of
His
scary.
gracious request.
Andrew's demands. No, but so that I think is why the 3rd season to me, Book Fire, did what Return of the Jedi did, which is actually showing the heroes at their most dire, but actually showing how they were going to plan to come back. And the thing is that even though it ended with
But they didn't. They just flailed around, like, and then he didn't have a
then they
plan
fought,
at the
and
end
they
of the
lost
finale, and then he
again,
ran
and they
away,
kept
and then they didn't
losing.
see him again until he won.
Right.
So
But-
they didn't have a plan at all. There was no plan.
Right, and they kind of just won it, which to me like is again in the spirit of the show, because they even said it. It's like, dude, like when have all of our plans have constantly been screwed up and failed? We've always had to improvise in the last minute. So screw it. How are we going to save the world? Let's just improvise, and it worked. So
Sokka tried to plan.
I
was going to argue that they did not want to improvise.
Listen.
They did not want to do that at all. They were like, this is a really bad idea, and we should wait for Aang to come back. He's not coming back? Okay, fuck it. Like,
it wasn't a matter of they
throw it to the wind. Let's find Iroh, maybe.
wait for him to come back.
When you have Toph, you have an instant win.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
like,
Toph is
first
kinda
of all, she just discovers metal bending, and then she's like, push me into this door. Boom, Goosh comes up as a Gundam.
Oh, one of my
boom, boom,
favorite
boom.
scenes.
And she's
I
like,
also-
by the way, I'm 12 and blind.
Best Earthbender like known. Like if you think about it, like
The
name
greatest
me one
Earthbender of all
that was-
time.
Yeah, exactly. Name me one Earthbender. She was so good, she literally invented her own form of bending. So like, yeah, it would make sense that like
Yeah.
she could do it
I was-
that quickly. Off
I
of
was
that.
just checking out the comics for after season 3, like the unofficial
Right.
season 4,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and
Search.
there's a little bit where she's like talking to Sokka about some earthbending shit, and she's like, "Call me the greatest earthbender who's ever lived," and he's like, "Yeah," and she's like, "No, seriously," and he goes, "You're the greatest earthbender who's ever lived." She's like,
Yeah.
"Yeah."
Are you talking about like The Search and
Right.
The Promise? I've
Yes.
heard those were really
Yeah,
good.
yeah, yeah.
They are.
The Promise
I
was
gotta
some
watch
of them,
those.
yeah.
The
For
Search
me,
is
it's
dope.
The Search.
The Promise
Search
is
is
cool.
oh man.
So Luke said something that it was kind of like my moment where I realized like, oh, this show's here to stay. As far as like my zeitgeist, like what I resonate with and will rewatch many times going forward. This actually, I'm gonna find a spot for it in my top 10. Sorry, How I Met Your Mother. Your day has come.
Yeah.
So I
How
think
Met Your Mother
Avatar is
left
now in my top 10
a
favorite
while
shows of
ago.
all time.
What?
And so
a
well,
while ago.
well, as Avatar ages like a fine wine, How I Met Your Mother just
That
rots
show
and
got
corrodes.
stale.
But
True.
That show got
the thing
stale.
is that,
the later seasons.
one of the
Especially
things
the
like
later seasons.
you know you have great characters when the quote unquote filler or quote unquote like semi bottle episodes, or even when they split the gang up and everyone goes their own way, when you're equally as invested as you are at like a climax moment, you know, the end arc of every
Yeah,
season.
bro, you should like the
It's
B
just,
plot.
like
B
there's
plot should not be something you hate. It should be two things that
Exactly.
you
And-
like.
I don't think it's B plot. Just like we always have those episodes in shows that you're like, why? Like, this is a good episode in and of itself, but as part of the greater whole season, why are we getting this now? You know,
especially shows from back in the
Sheep
day
thing,
that
the
ran
Sheep
for as
daydream
long as they
episode.
did. Like me and Dom speak about this quite a bit, and we talk about, shows like Lost on Talking TV. Back in the day, they had to run for like 20, 25 episodes. That was just what the networks ordered. So the fact that every episode is compelling, and even though there are filler guides out there, I kind of think those are disrespectful to this show, which is the first time I can say that about an anime. It's really comes down to the characters. We can talk about the scenery. Luke, I agree with everything you said at the top of this podcast, but at the end of the day, the reason I kept watching is because the more and more I got from these characters one-on-one, I was like, fuck, I almost hope they don't get back together, because like I feel like I really know Katara right now. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Like Zuko alone episode, top 3 episodes, and the whole episode is him just going off on his own and having like his own little magnificent 7 episode with the B plot to me, finally giving you the backstory that you were craving that whole time, that had only been hinted at about his mom, because you only really heard about him wanting to impress his dad, and you're like, okay, where's his mom? Where's his mom? And then showing that his mom was arguably like way more instrumental in his upbringing, and kind of explain why he was important. Why she was more important to him than his dad. And then they break that down even further in the last season by showing his origins above that. I'll let Luke get to that, because I'm gonna go off on a tangent.
Well, what I want to say about Zuko alone is like, I think the real importance of that is like, you get like his backstory and stuff, and you learn that kind of shit about Azula. And I think one of the scenes that
she was at an early age
is he's like sleeping, and he's like, Azula always lies. Azula always lies. Like, and that's just kind of like a conditioning thing for him. That's like, there is no redemption. There is no redemption. There is no redemption. Like, with that episode happening, it's like he goes through this whole thing. He protects these people and all that. And like, I think this is really the first time, like, stripped of title, stripped of like title and rank, stripped of everyone. He's not with Iroh anymore. Stripped of like kind of loyalty. Like he's stripped of nation. Like he has nothing. So yeah. Oh, I said stripped. Come on, Andrew. So
listen, man, I'm getting sleepy. I'm gonna get a little
Andrew's like the second oldest one here, and he's like,
he's the oldest one here. He's the oldest one here, Mr. Mature.
Have you guys even been?
Oh no, shit, you're right.
So he loses all of these things, and he's just kind of like a bare person. Like he has like no identity really. I mean, think about it. Like his identity is, other than this scar, like, what is it then? Like, who is he at that in Zuko alone? He's not Iroh's nephew right now because he left him behind. He's not the prince. He's been, excommunicated or whatever. And he's not even a firebender at this point because he's trying to conceal that and like hide everything. So he does all of this to make a new identity. He steps up to these people and he tries to protect them. And in the end, he has to kind of like come into himself and realize like, well, there's one thing that I am, and it's like, boom, I am like I am a firebender, and like I'm about to be a protector. I'm going to protect these people.
And if he wasn't,
the first time that,
no, keep going. Yeah, sorry.
Well, this is like the first time that he, on a very personal micro level, sees what his nation and the people that he campaigned, like he's been campaigning and like fighting for, like who they really hurt on a micro level, and someone that like he found he cared about over nothing, like over like 2 days. It's just this kid who reminds him of himself, and it's like, who do I want? Like, so when you're nobody, who do you want to be? And so in that moment, he has to be a firebender. He has to be like a tool of that nation, and he has to be a criminal or a villain, even though what he sees is like, I'm trying to be a protector. It's that like forced role. It's like self-fulfilling prophecy almost, until like he takes that time and he leaves, and you see that he grows from that. Obviously, I mean, he has like the moments of trepidation. So obviously when Azula was like, come with me, and he falls. Yeah,
and
like,
Luke,
that's really where the gears start turning.
Yeah,
he's who gets hurt because of what I do.
That's part of like why Zuko's redemption is like good, because obviously we've seen redemption stories in a lot of, like, another Star Wars one, like Darth Vader, he's a redemption story. But like Zuko's is cool, I mean, for a lot of reasons. But one, is that it's not just like a straight line. Like the beginning of the show, he's just like, I must capture the Avatar no matter what. I'm the Fire Prince, blah, blah, blah. I'll do bad things if it gets the Avatar. And like the show would be boring if it was just that. And then he just spends time with Uncle Iroh and he's like, oh man, I'm kind of a jerk. And then eventually he's like, oh, well, I should be friends with the Avatar. But it's like he goes up, and then he gets to Ba Sing Se, and then he has that like fever dream. And then he wakes up and he like sweat all the evil out of him or whatever that was. And and then
I think that was what it was unofficially called.
Yeah. And then he's like, oh, I'm totally down to just have a tea shop with my uncle. Like, this is going to be great. And then Azula's like, or you could forget about all of that and you can help me fight the Avatar and we can go back as heroes. And if
I remember correctly,
you're thinking that he's not going to do that. And then he's like, shut up, I'm totally going to do that.
So let me just say this real quick.
When does the scene where Iroh says to him, like,
you have to
gotta
think
ask
about
yourself,
what you want?
like, the real question?
Oh, when in
the catacombs.
Yeah, in the catacombs, but he had the chance to capture Appa.
That's like right before that happened.
Yeah.
It's when he's deciding whether or not he wants to take. When he
disguises the blue spirit.
Yeah.
So the thing is about all that, Andrew, and we'll come back to you in a second, but I just want to chime in while we're on the specific moment. Like that whole sequence, I think I personally would watch a spin-off of just Zuko and Iroh running the tea shop. I love that.
Yes, dude.
That by far is my favorite.
With you.
That's a sitcom that I would actually watch.
Exactly.
That's not a
series. That I would
That's a
watch.
5-minute short. That's not a series. That's not a spin-off series. Get out of here.
We could take that in so many different ways because each episode you introduce a new guest and there's a little but we don't need to get into that. But so I think that
tea
is like
nothing more than hot leaf juice.
Uncle, that's what all tea is. To sink my own family.
I know you're not supposed to cry over spilled tea, but still,
Chris,
real quick, hold on. Give me a second here, guys. I gotta get this out
the other day with dark green water.
True. That is true. That was a good GIF. I have to say that was a well done GIF. I usually hate GIFs, but I enjoyed that one. Now let me just say why I enjoyed this specific moment before we give it back to Andrew on his redemption story. Then we'll swing it to Dom. It's because I really thought, I knew he was going to go back on this promise because I knew there was a third season. This is me watching it as an older sort of viewer who's been studying this stuff for a little while now. But the reason why I was... it's hard to not think that way after a certain point. But the reason why I was specifically happy with them going through something I've seen so many shows do so many different ways is because it wasn't forced. It wasn't like, where do we go next with the script? Usually people do this. It's like, no. Zuko needed that fall from grace. He needed to see what he had lost. He needed to see what his father's love actually was, because then, Sozin's Comet parts 1 through 4 don't mean shit. You know what I mean? Like the way that this show painted itself so perfectly as a portrait to the very end blows my mind. Even when they hit tropes, even when they hit anime tropes specifically, that's a big anime style thing that you've seen many times. It's just, but they've done it almost better than some animes.
And even going back on like what Luke said from like what Zuko was learning while he was alone, like when he's on the day of Black Sun, when the gang doesn't actually find the Fire Lord, but Zuko does, and he's like, I'm here to talk to you since you can't scar my other eye right now. And he's like, he doesn't say like he's been out in the world, he's been traveling, and he's yelling at his dad, and he's like, they hate us, like talking about the Fire Nation, like they hate us and we deserve it. Not they hate you, not you're terrible, or the Fire Nation is terrible and I was just a victim. Like they hate us. Like he knows that he's done terrible shit, and he's realizing like Chris said, like he couldn't just be like, oh well, Uncle Iroh's really smart and he says that my dad is a jerk, so I should just trust him and just know that my dad's a jerk. Like he needed to.
And he gets mad at Iroh.
And he gets mad at Iroh.
For forgiving me. Like,
and then he does that, and he goes back and he sits in the war room, and he's his dad's right hand, and he's got all what he wants. He's got his girlfriend. He's got a good cry, and then he realizes, like when he's sitting in the war room, like wait a second, like
is this what I really want?
It's not good to wipe out the Earth Kingdom.
Yeah.
I'm realizing this is bad. The right thing to do would be to speak out. So when I was a kid, that was right, what I did. And what my dad did was wrong. And he like has this whole realization. And then like, that's why his redemption is also just so like good. And then when he joins the gang, this is also another thing. Like with Zuko, it's like every time he tries to do something good, like something bad happens. Like he gives the kid, I don't remember what he gives him, but he gives the kids whatever he gave him. And his
I think it
mom's
was the
like,
dagger, I think.
exactly, yeah. And his mom's like, why would you give him this? And
Yeah.
he's like, I thought it was the right thing to do. And then he goes to the gang and he's like, hey guys, I'd like to teach Aang firebending. And they're like, fuck you. And he's like,
Yeah,
okay,
pretty much.
sorry.
You go here.
And then,
Yeah, it's like,
and then Toph,
no.
and then Toph goes to talk to him and he burns her and he's
Sorry.
like, oh my God. And again, he could have been like, fucking Toph sneaking up on me, like this, that, the other thing. But he was like, oh, why did I do that? Like, why did I burn her?
Yeah,
I can't
It's
believe
always
this happened.
on him, which to me is like
Exactly.
what makes him the most three-dimensional character in the show, is
And-
that Zuko was kind of always aware. Even before, when he had much less self-awareness in the first couple seasons, like he was always aware that he was the source of his own misery. And then like
Mhm.
when they get into his backstory, like to me, I still think like, because this would be such, I feel like, a cliched moment in other shows, but Avatar does this so well, which is when it, to me, in one of my favorite episodes of the show, the Avatar and the Fire Lord, when it breaks down the origin of Sozin and Roku, and they're like, okay, so that only applies to Aang. How in the hell does this apply to Zuko? You know, because for the majority of the show, we've only known that Zuko was descended from Sozin. But then when we find out that he's also descended from Roku, which gives him an even stronger connection to Aang through his mom's side, and you're like, whoa! It's not like it doesn't explain away anything, but like it adds just that much more context to and already to me arguably the best character on the show. But
exactly,
I kind of argue about his self-awareness in the first season.
Yeah,
right. And also,
I don't think he's highly self-aware. I think it's mostly pride. That's like
no, that's what I'm saying. He's not self-aware at all in the first season.
But like you see, like he blames like Iroh a lot for those things. It's just kind of that like hot-headed teen anger. I think the thing that really like makes the turning point, and again I call back to the Zuko alone thing, is like and almost every single scene he has with Iroh is Iroh teaches him humility, and that's like the only thing that cures him of the fact that like I don't have to do this vengeance quest anymore. Like I can just give up, but giving up means being humiliated. Like
except when it comes to smacking Azula around, which
exactly.
she had coming.
I know
that was something that even Iroh knew. He's like, oh no, she's crazy. She's got to be taken out.
Sibling rivalry.
I know.
Get it.
You're gonna say she's my sister.
That went
and I
so
should
far
try to get
beyond
along
sibling
with
rivalry. Like, even Iroh knew
that.
Dude, but then for Cocoa Puffs.
I know. Just to go back to Zuko, like I know that we're gonna talk about Korra in a different episode, but then like his design later when he's an old man and stuff, it's like
very emblematic.
It's like it's got the Sozin thing, but it's got the Roku thing, and it's because like he realizes that he can't like forget about either side. It's like you got to remember like Sozin was obviously insane, but like he just like he loved the Fire Nation and like he wanted, like he was a Fire Lord, like he was like the Fire Nation is my nation and I need to do what's the best thing for the Fire Nation, blah blah blah. Obviously he got kind of crazy and evil. Roku was like, oh, but balance and this and that, but then he was also like, but Sozin's my friend, so like whatever.
And the thing that you could also add to that is the fact that you could almost look at Roku becoming the Avatar as the source of Sozin, because to me the whole thing about that is that Sozin's kind of drive for one that came from the insecurity that his best friend was now the most powerful person on the earth, and he was like, okay, how am I gonna like compete with that? And that was kind of his way. It's like, okay, well, I'm just gonna have the Fire Nation control the Earth, and it didn't really, he wasn't really like thinking that, like, hey, obviously like that, but that was the subconscious, like his extra need was, okay, you know, I want to spread, you know, whatever the bullshit explanation that he gave to Roku was, I want to share our peace and prosperity with the rest of the world, you know, that thing. But it really, let's face it, it really was the fact that, okay, my best friend is now the most powerful person on the planet. How am I going to compete with that? And also,
first thing he's got to do is stand straight up and pull the pin out of his chair so he's not so fucking butthurt next time.
Oh, I see what you did there. But so, kind of the last thing that I wanted to tackle.
Before
we're only an hour 1 of 3 here.
Good God.
Listen, before we move on, before we move on from the Avatar and
I got like 25 minutes before I'm going to look at a comment outside.
Before we move on from that episode, I need to mention the plot hole in that episode. Roku, everybody, the Fire Lord and the Avatar. I don't remember the order.
Avatar and the Fire Lord,
whatever. So everybody's off the island. Why do you need to stay and try to stop the volcano from erupting?
That was the thing that even when I was looking back, I'm like, okay, that's...
Everyone's off the island, dude.
They don't have to rebuild
that. I will admit, I'm like, okay, that's a little bit of.
But listen, you could rebuild. He could rebuild houses in 2 seconds. He's the Avatar. Make him out of stone.
The thing is, like he's the.
Don't give me that.
That's kind of the point. He's the Avatar. What is he? They're going to be like, oh, Roku, thank you for stopping by and bringing all these hand-me-down robes instead of stopping that volcano over there. Like, of course, he's going to stop the volcano.
And then I'd be like, well, You're welcome. You're
Superman.
alive.
There's a nuke, but thanks for beating up this mugger. Like,
that's a good comparison. But I wanted to touch on like kind of one thing to me that I think that this show, I guess, does right, especially given the wake of everything that's going on today. Obviously, with I think it's safe to say that kind of American politics has been exposed as being like the sham that it is. Which is like all it feels like every single person that we vote into office is just like a bigger and bigger clown who only exists to like satisfy like our own insatiable need for entertainment. Rather than actual, I'm getting there. Trust me, I'm getting there. If you don't actually fucking interrupt me, I'll actually like be able to get to a plot to a point. But the thing is that I loved about this show is that this show to me actually showed kind of the difference between politics and actual decisions that would like result in like fucking decisions that would affect other people, and I feel like that was another great mature thing that this show did, which is that it showed that the choices that these characters made actually did have repercussions that would affect everybody. And I love how, so again, specifically going back to the Zuko alone thing, that was like kind of Zuko almost beginning to understand the difference between doing what is right and doing what everyone says is right for the greater good, which I think we all know at this point is kind of a bullshit term, like kind of the term that's a greater good. Let's face it, that's just an excuse that the higher ups use in order to justify their increasingly more and more shitty actions. But I like I said, I want to touch on that.
Defense.
What's that?
The Nuremberg defense of Avatar.
Yeah, exactly.
Keep going, Dom.
No, yeah,
that was the end of my point because like I wanted to bring that up because obviously the whole point is that the firebenders, even though I think at this point we all know that Ozai and Azula are lunatics, like again, going back to the Stosen thing, it started from a place of joy. And we also see once we get into the Earth Kingdom that also, even though the firebenders are the bad guys, we also know that in a way what they're doing in Ba Sing Se is worse because in Ba Sing Se they basically enacted like a communist red state where they where they are literally silencing people who are trying to speak out in any form of opposition, like the Ba Sing Se is literally operating underneath the censorship state when they first get there, and literally to the point where they show, to me, the brilliance of this show and how it handled the politics at first is the fact that they showed that literally at first the only way to actually like exist in a society that like where like the right thing could happen was to literally separate yourself from society, like obviously with the air nomads and how the northern and southern water tribes were separated primarily from everything.
It's like in The Promise there's a point where Zuko's talking to Ozai when he's in jail and he's
trying to call my dog
and he's trying to like figure out what he's supposed to do because like the Earth Kingdom and the Fire Nation are like butting heads with something right now. And he's talking to his dad, and his dad's like, well, your problem is that, you're not just, you got to pick a decision and then you got to stick to it because like you're trying to figure out what's right and what's wrong, but you're the Fire Lord, so you decide what's right. And he's like, that's not right, and wrong is above the Fire Lord. It's even above the Avatar. But like, obviously at the beginning when Fire Lord Ozai is the Fire Lord, like that's what he thinks. He's not thinking like, is what I'm doing is right because there's a wrong and I'm doing the right. He's like, I'm the Fire Lord, so I decide what's right for the Fire Nation, and this is right. So
right, but you also see those decisions afflicted by the other characters too, because even though other characters do stuff that they know is right, like they still like have to deal with. Like obviously, Aang's whole big struggle, especially when we get to the last couple episodes, is dealing with the fact that him having to make the one decision that he knows is the only thing that will be the way to save the world goes against everything that he believes in and has been brought up to believe, which is like airbender, pacifist, believe in helping all life and always finding a solution.
Kyoshi comes up and is just like,
you gotta kill that motherfucker. You gotta kill him.
Smoke the fool.
The murder.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that's why I think the character of Jet.
Avatar Kyoshi taught us anything. It's murder is okay.
No, but that, and also I think the character of Jet is
for murder is cool.
Jesus, I think the character of Jet is a good character to sort of bring up in regards to this part of the conversation, because he sort of felt he was doing the right thing, but it really was the wrong thing. And I think that sort of is something you can look at. Like, I don't want to get too political right now, but since Dom sort of opened it up, I'll just say this. I mean, in difficult times, I think people have a hard time differentiating what their actions are as good and bad. And it's Jet was, I think, strictly acting on his gut. He felt hurt. He felt betrayed. So he was doing what he thought was the right thing for his small little group. I think they called themselves a gang.
The Freedom Fighters.
Freedom Fighters. And so it's tough, and this is a very divided world, much like the one we live in. So that's kind of why I said early on, it was interesting watching this show in this political climate at the age that I'm at, with sort of the understanding of everything that's going on that I have, just because of the fact that, like, yeah, like there's implications to these kind of things, and actions do have consequences. And that's why, again, I felt there was such a charm, but also such like search within yourself if you really want to get the third layer out of the show, with the fact that it's centered around kids coming of age, not just with the typical coming of age, like, oh wow, look, like there's a Sakura, Naruto, go get her. You know, it's like there's like a lot of political implications in regards
Wait
to
until
this.
you get to Legend of Korra, bro.
Yeah,
right.
And so I
man.
just thought it was like a really interesting dichotomy, and just the way that they chose to explore politics and just how the show grows and evolves with the characters. It's a little surreal if you look around and you talk to anyone this day and age. Their political stance is the only political stance right now, and they can't possibly see how you have a different political stance than them, because they're right and they believe that in their heart. And if you don't believe that, well, then maybe they can't speak to you. So it's just so crazy to see them explore something pretty similar. Like Andrew said, like it's almost like a racial war that's being fought by the Fire Nation, like discriminating against the other tribes. Yeah, and so it's just crazy to just see that told through the scope of children, and also to watch it for the first time in this political climate. So that's why I can really appreciate the show, because you can watch this as a 10-year-old and get something out of it. You can watch this as a 21-year-old and get something out of it. And I think I'm going to watch the show many times in my life going forward. And I think I'm just going to keep getting something out of it, because it's just that well written. It's that layered, and it's just that, you know, pertinent.
And not to mention, because it's whether it's anime or just anime-esque, the action is just on point.
The action is
and
awesome.
They based all of the bending on actual martial arts. They even picked the martial arts that, like, the philosophy behind the martial arts goes with it, like Tai Chi is with water because it's all flowing movements, and the fire bending is all like Northern Kung Fu because it's more aggressive and all that stuff. And when they were animating it, they were like, well, how do we get these guys to really understand, like, how to animate this? And they were like, well, we're just going to teach literally everybody who's animating the show the basics of all the kung fu, so that they understand, or the martial arts, I'm sorry, so that they understand, like, every motion, what all the motion is, so they don't just like see it and draw, like they're like, this is what your body's doing. And I thought that was so cool. And the studio, one of the studios that they had animating the show was a South Korean studio. I can't remember the name, but it was the first time that they didn't give them, like, I don't remember what the phrase was, but essentially like time frames for the scenes, that it's like you have to make it do this or you have to line it up with this. Like they just let them, they were like, here's the scene, animate it, and then they did it, and then they, like, you know, put it all together.
Like how long? Yeah.
Exactly, and like to dictate the fights and like how much of this and whatever, and it was just the.
I think there's honestly such a good balance of.
It's a masterpiece.
Yeah, film is the ultimate creative art form too. You know, so many moving parts. So that's really impressive.
And
especially
like
for animation too, which arguably involves like more moving parts if you think about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I like that thought of like which martial arts practices and like what their disciplines are, like informing how the motions are. Because I mean, if you really, because you're right. I mean, like you watch like Firebenders and stuff, it's all like jabs. It's like even with the dancing stuff, it's always like forward. Like there's
and in Legend of Korra, like Mako's basically a boxer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you see him, like his stances. I mean, Zuko's like that too. His stance is always like this, and then you get like water bending, and you always see the circles. You always see, like,
they're
flowing. So Northern Kung Fu for fire bending, Tai Chi for water bending, and then what were the styles that they used for earth bending and air bending?
I don't remember.
I know that like horse stance is like one of the things for earth bending. I don't know what the actual
point being. They did their research.
Yeah, they did their research.
They definitely did their research.
Guys, so this has been an awesome chat. But before we get into final closing thoughts, we like to do this thing where whenever we have a conversation about a TV show, we always break down and run through our favorite characters of the show. We did that with Lost, and we did that, Chris. We did that with one other thing that I'm drawing a blank on right now.
There's so many.
It definitely we did it with Ozark.
Oh no, and definitely not Ozark. Definitely not that. No, I think we did it with Clone Wars. Yeah, I briefly touched on it when we did our Clone Wars episode. So let's just, for the last bit, before we close this off and give our closing thoughts
can I add
on
a caveat to this? Because I think this is a show that we've all referenced specific episodes. Maybe we do like our favorite episode.
Yeah, no, actually, favorite character and favorite episode. Even better. Absolutely. So, so starting off before we get into final thoughts on, to my mind, and I think we can all agree what is the greatest American animated show, and probably, if we're being honest, the greatest animated show ever made. We're on my big screen. So I guess we're going to start with me. So my favorite character.
All
right,
Full Metal Alchemist. Have you seen Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood? Because if we're talking about the best anime,
he said,
I said
American animated show.
American animated. If you were listening,
And you know what, Dom? We're not going to start with you. We're going to start with our guest first.
Anime of all
Yeah,
time.
I go last. Start with Andrew. Like he's
I just thought you were going to go on a monologue, and I felt
I
like
was
it was going to be powerful.
surprisingly enough, I was not. I was cutting it off there. So I understand where you were coming from, though.
Oh man,
Yeah.
My favorite episode. That's a tough one.
Character and episode.
Right now, I'm looking really quickly at all the episodes on Netflix, just like scrolling through the.
God, I don't even remember. I just know what I like.
I got mine.
I'd say just looking at these right now, my favorite filler episode, like, not important episode, is probably the Painted Lady, because that one is freaking cool, because Katara is a badass. Also,
I actually hate that episode.
Just Katara, that I don't care. Also, Katara's waterbending journey is so sick. Like the first episode, she can like barely freeze people, and then in the Southern Raiders one, she's literally like stopping rain, like
and so bloodbending.
Cool. And bloodbending. That's pretty cool. But my favorite
stopping rain, that's so sick. I forgot about that.
I mean, the finale is just so cool. Like the final Agni Kai and the battle with Ozai, like those are just such cool battles. Like how is that not one of your favorites,
Not to mention the old masters taking back Ba Sing Se.
Okay, the old masters, dude. Oh, Jong, bro.
Oh my god, dude, Jong, freaking Iroh blasting apart the gates.
Yes, it's so cool.
Paku launching over the gates with that oh my god, dude.
It's
I can go on for hours about that one sequence.
But my favorite episode, my favorite character in The Last Airbender.
First thing that comes to your mind, like speak from the heart right now, kid.
I feel like it has to be Zuko, because like he's just so, like, even when he's a bad guy, I love him because like he's a cool villain. Like his goals are clear. Like he's not like, I feel like he bothered me the least. Like I feel like there were times where I was like, yo, Aang, like you're the Avatar dude, like shut up and stop crying, like get over it. Or like Katara is like, stop being such an annoying girl sometimes, like whatever. But like I feel like Zuko, I was always like, I totally understand why you feel the way you feel, dude. I get it. Like he's just cool, and obviously like he's just badass. And I'm pretty sure if I was born in the Avatar world, I would be a firebender too. So I kind of like relate to him in a weird way. And also, I love Dante Bosco. Shout out Rufio. Hook is one of the best movies of all time. And he was American Dragon Jake Long.
Yes, he was.
So, and did you know? First of all, everyone here saw the Goofy movie, right?
No. What the original Goofy movie? Yeah.
Dude,
underrated.
He's the kid in the auditorium going, "Stacey, talk to me, baby." That's Dante Bosco.
Okay. I was probably getting distracted by Pauly Shore, just being Pauly Shore in that movie. So that's probably why. So going over to Luke, favorite episode and favorite character.
I really wish Johnny was still here for when I said this. My thing with like the character that I'm gonna pick is like, it's Iroh. Like Iroh is my favorite character because I love a wise, like sagely kind of character. He's also really good for exposition. So like as a writer, I love that. But I have to say, like, I want to give like a couple of like honorable mention shout outs to characters that just like I loved so much. Toe. Or like the swamp benders, like I love swamp benders. I think they're so funny.
Justice for the swamp benders.
They have southern accent.
I think he's like a great character. Yeah, I think he's just such a good like addition of a character. They don't overuse him. And this is the one I was hoping Johnny was here for. Voiced by the incredible John DiMaggio, fake Toph, the actor who plays Toph.
Yes.
I scream.
I released sonic screams from my mouth. Oh, dude, I got a pretty good look at you. So I just love that line. It makes me laugh. But yeah, so I would say Iroh is definitely my favorite character. I think like I love T. Like I just think that's so funny. He's a very tragic character that throughout the whole thing, like up until the very end, I mean, is always tragic. Like even his good times, like traveling with Zuko, like he knows that Zuko sees him as like a surrogate father, and then that means that like he feels animosity because it's somebody in an authority position over him. It's like a surrogate of his father, an extension, an eye of his father watching over him, and he doesn't realize like that it's really because Iroh feels like so depressed and like failed as a father that this is like his redemption. So you see like Iroh goes on this redemption story with Zuko, and everybody's like, oh, it's like Zuko's got the best redemption, and he does. It was a great redemption story. But Iroh is like he's been on the exact same redemption like track the whole time, and like he's just not as like dramatic of evidence. Like it's all these small instances. They're in the hot tub together, they like Zuko goes on the date with like that girl. Like there's all these small things that are just huge victories for Iroh, like as subtle subtext that I think just like as a writer, like he's such a nuanced character that, and he's also the comic relief. Like you don't really think about it until it's all been done and you're allowed to kind of let that settle. So I would say, like, of the main cast, Iroh is my favorite. All of those like side characters, I mean, there's just too many to name. Like the cabbage guy, like he's
God, the
Booby.
cabbage.
I love
the cabbage
Booby.
Oh, Booby.
Dude, the guy who foams at the mouth.
Fantastic character.
Oh man.
The guy who foams at the mouth.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's the Avatar. Yeah. Like there's just so many stupid characters that I think are really great. In terms of like my favorite episode, and I really had to think about this one when Andrew was talking. I wish I want to be like Avatar Aang is like just such a good episode because it's just him using all the powers, and that's so fucking cool. Like the sphere, the rocks whipping.
Yep,
like,
the
it's just
first
so
sign of the
awesome.
Avatar sphere.
Just amazing visual. Like he's just, you get to really see. You know when like you're watching like Naruto and you're like, boom, here comes the fucking Nine Tails thing, and you're like, oh, get him. Like
You're like, oh shit,
max power, baby.
Susanoo.
That moment.
It's the over 9,000 moment. You're like, it's over 9,000. But my real favorite episode is most definitely Bitter Work, where he's learning how to like earthbend. So the reason I like Bitter Work is because like there's rarely any like action. There's no like conflict. Like
Well,
there's no,
Sokka's in a
like,
hole the
fights.
whole episode.
Like,
Yeah,
well,
right.
there's no human conflict. I mean, like they're not like fighting firebenders and stuff. And this is like a moment where there's very separate moments with each of them. You've got Sokka by himself, then he's got a moment with Aang talking. You've got Katara speaking with Toph for like kind of their two teachers with the same like prodigy student who could learn anything in like a minute, but like how do you teach someone like that? And then so you get like a real development into Aang's character. You see frustration in him at like, I'm supposed to be the best and I can do everything all the time. I'm the only person in the entire world who can do everything. Like, and I'm still frustrated about this. Now on the B story, which is really what gets me, is you have like Iroh really explaining like not just humility, but like patience to Zuko, and then he draws out the thing of the four nations and he shows like this is balance, like this is what the world used to be until we decided like we needed it unbalanced, or that the true balance would be we control everything. So he explains kind of the importance of these nations, what they like do and what they represent, and then he teaches him the lightning, you know, like how to redirect lightning, which, you know, becomes a massive point to the story, and again, like you barely notice it. And then the best fucking scene in the whole show for me, bro, he's standing on the mountain, come on, strike me, like he's just screaming.
You've never held back before.
Yeah, that was a good moment.
Like,
man, I never thought of that episode that way. That's good.
Like, dude, that's so much.
That gets
and
me,
arguably how that episode
like,
comes
that
after like
the whole world against me, like
and how that episode comes after like one of the most intense episodes with the chase, which is just like nonstop action for a whole episode.
That just made me think of
like
that just made me think of my actual favorite episode. I don't even necessarily remember which one exactly it is, but they're in Ba Sing Se when they're trying to get to the Earth King and they have to like fight off all those Earth benders and they're like going up the stairs. It is the Earth King, right? Yeah,
that's the Earth King.
Dude, that one is so good. First of all, that whole fight is amazing. Anytime they fight the Dai Li is amazing. Then when like they find out, like, I mean, obviously you already know that like there's some sketchy shit going on in Ba Sing Se, but then like when you find out that it's just like there is no war. And like all this like mind control shit, you're like, wait a second, because then it's like, because it's like so many times the gang, they're like, all right, here's the plan, and then they're like, all right, and we're about to execute this plan. It's about to be, oh shit, something bad happened instead. I hate that, and it's like, it happens all the time, and I feel like you almost never expect it. But then in that one, it's like, cool, we finally got to Ba Sing Se. It's like the last safe place. We're going to tell the Earth King about the Day of Black Sun. Shit's about to be awesome. We're about to destroy the Fire Nation. Then we get there, and it's like, no, also no, also no, also
hard no.
And it's like, oh my god, these guys are trying to save the entire world, and yet the entire world is against them. It's like, how
They also have
brilliant.
to
How
grapple
do you
with the fact
get-
that they just
absolutely
learned about a
brilliant.
real bear.
A real bear.
They have
They
to
have
grapple with
fights
the fact
against
that
a
a real
real
bear
There's an
bear.
actual real animal. It's not an
Yeah.
animal hybrid.
A normal bear. I'm
yeah.
pretty
And
sure
then
there's a
also,
dog in
and then,
that.
dude, and the whole Kyoshi warrior thing, like
Oh
with the
my
them
God.
infiltrating like
When
that, I was like, that's
gets
so
Oh,
cool.
explained,
Kylie.
bro. That
Oh,
was
man.
nuts.
Kylie.
It still means for like
I love
as much as I
Kylie.
love Sosa's comment, like the Guru / the Crossroads of Destiny. It's like that's one of the few episodes I'm glad Netflix made that one episode because that really is one like
Anytime-
extended episode if you think about it.
Basically, the entire Bossing Say saga or arc is my favorite episode.
Yeah, that's that's
Definitely.
the best.
So-
chunk
So
of
let's
time.
let's move on to the
Absolutely.
hosts.
Yes, thank you. For actually finally acknowledging the pecking order, Andrew. No, I'm just kidding. So
Yeah,
my
Chris,
favorite. I'll make
tell
this.
them
I'll
to
make,
shut up and start talking.
hierarchy.
I'll make this
Chungle
quick. My
down
favorite
Bim
character is
rules
Zuko for every reason that Andrew already brought up, but also shout out to some of my other favorite characters: Sokka, Toph. I also really like Katara. I love
I
Aang
always
too
forget
because
about
everyone always discounts him as the main character, but I think that Aang, or again,
Aang
after
is a
Zuko
goat.
had the best arc, but Aang had the most difficulties, the biggest oppositions, hurdles to overcome. God, my brain is melting. As you can see, like the brain fluid is coming out of my ears. And also shout out to Azula for being one of the best animated
Yes.
villains we've ever seen. Like she took the idea of the unlikable villain but also the villain that you love to hate, but also the villain that you love to watch because she's so goddamn entertaining but so goddamn evil, and just amped every single one of those feelings up to 11. Like she really mashed up. Like you only heard her in passing. What Zuko said is like, "You remind me of my sister. Everything comes easier to her." And then she comes in the first episode. You're like, "Oh, you understand that she is the true antagonist for Zuko,"
she
and
ramps
also like
everything
she's become
up.
so much worse of an antagonist for everybody else than they could have possibly hoped for. So that's my thing there. And then for my favorite episode, so Sosin's comment to me, the more and more that I think about it, might be the greatest TV series finale that I've ever seen. Obviously, Breaking Bad was number one, but the more and more I think about it is that even Breaking Bad, I said it. Yeah, I said it. It might be the greatest TV series finale I've ever seen because, again, it's a thing that I got from the Nostalgia Critic, which is that yes, just keep doing the clip show of that. Just keep doing that. That's great. Everybody who's listening to this on audio will have no idea what this is, but it's literally just Chris cutting to random reaction shots
I've never seen Breaking Bad.
People left reacting to
I
this.
saw the first season.
Because the whole thing is that
never
so many
seen it.
shows, cough, Lost, cough, 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 How I Met Your Mother, cough, cough, just stay on for way too long, and they way overstay their welcome. So that, by the time they do come to their finales, like regardless of whether they're bad, and both of those finales were bad, it's just that by the point is like by the time they got there, people were just be like, okay, fine, whatever, it's over. We've been on this trip for so long. And it really wasn't until Game of Thrones that we got a show that people were just like suckered in for the entire. Actually, Lost probably was that. But anyways, but the point being is that Avatar is one of those few shows that just came, had its perfect season run, and then ended in quite possibly like the grandest of fashions, and that's to me like why I love Sosin's comment. But to me, my personal favorite, if I had to pick one, it's between two. Appa's Lost Days I love, but I think my personal favorite would have to be The Storm, because to me, again, I would go with the Avatar and the Fire Lord, but to me, The Storm did what the Avatar and the Fire Lord, like Avatar and the Fire Lord just felt like almost like an homage to The Storm, because like this is an episode where you finally got Aang and Zuko's backstories, but it finally like it gave you so much context to everything that had kind of only been hinted at like going up throughout the show. And to me, that was kind of the defining point that really showed that Avatar was more than just going to be another kid's show, because that was where we got so much context on Zuko. We got so much context on Aang. It almost kind of like made you look at Aang in a way different light. And it's kind of like the whole thing is that like everyone was saying is just like, oh, you were gone for 100 years and everything, where were you when the Fire Nation started the war? For the most part, you were always willing to give Aang the benefit of the doubt, because you were like, yeah, he was stuck in an iceberg, but you're always wondering like, yeah, but how did he get there? And this episode showed that the reason for that, and then you realize you're like, oh wait, Aang did run away and shirk his responsibilities, and because of that one fatal mistake, going back to how every character's decision in this affects every other facet of everything in this show, because of that one fatal mistake that he made, the Fire Nation invaded, wiped out his people completely. Like the air nomads were completely gone. Not that him being around would have made that much of a difference, but the point being is that he still has to live with that guilt for the rest of his life. And that's not even getting into the fact of now you finally understand why Zuko is the way he is, because that just gives you all the bit of backstory that you need, which is that like he why Zuko is the way that he is, which is like, Zuko tried to do the right thing at first, and he got half his face burned off for it. So that's why I gotta go with the Storm. Yeah, by his own dad. So that's why I gotta go with the Storm as my personal favorite episode.
But I think we're all forgetting about one of the greatest characters, the Boulder.
Yes, the Boulder is no longer the Boulder no longer feels sad about your. I forgot what the line was. My brain shot. Chris, favorite character in episode. Let's wrap this up.
The Boulder is more than happy to defend his nation.
Yeah, that was a good character. Yeah, my honorable mention is Suki, because I think it's so incredible what they did with characters like Jet and Suki, whereas they were there, but they weren't, obviously main cast, but they
My
always
first girlfriend
served.
turned into the moon.
Yo,
That's rough, buddy.
Oh,
yeah,
rough, buddy.
Exactly. But they really,
That's rough, buddy.
the experiences and their interactions they have with these sort of like secondary characters really leave their mark, whereas in other shows I feel they become forgotten, especially since we've been doing a lot of comparisons to like traditional anime in this one. So it just goes to show that everything that the 3 seasons of Avatar did was with a purpose, even in these sort of filler type episodes. And someone who didn't really find his main purpose, I would say, until very later on in the show, or at least didn't establish his skill set, would be Sokka, my favorite character. I like how he was sort of the black sheep of the group, but again, one of the charming things about this show is sort of showing how, these are just kids, and so they really undersell themselves because they are self-conscious. And yeah, they're trying to save the world, and they're the only ones who can save the world, but still, they're just kids. So his importance was there the whole time. He just didn't see it because he was a kid, and he was going through, girls for the first time and like changing as a person all at once while having to take down the Fire Lord and save millions of people's lives.
Probably got laid more than any other character on the show.
Yeah, probably, but they didn't go there. That's the when Comedy Central buys it and they rebrand it. But so Sokka, just because I feel like
Adult Swim's Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's all claymation now.
Yeah,
it's just Sokka just having sex with every girl.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, all right, we don't need to.
Hey, you want to have sex?
He's got the
Jack
rose
Andrews
in his
browsing
mouth. I
history.
love that.
Listen, all I'm saying is that when Sokka was waiting in his tent for Suki, and then when Suki finally
got
gets
the
in this
rose,
tent,
yeah.
Toph has
What's gonna
seismic
happen
senses.
there?
All I'm saying is Toph feels whenever anybody's hooking up in that group. Just continue.
God.
It could feel even worse for
I
Tom.
didn't even think about that.
Oh
That's awful.
no!
But Sokka, just because I feel like he's a little bit of everyone. Sometimes feeling like you don't truly belong or you don't have a purpose when all you got to do is just stop being so hard on yourself. And
he's kind of the audience surrogate.
So yeah, exactly. And I really appreciate them giving us like a really cool Looking Glass type character that also is a complete badass when he gets that meteor sword. But my favorite episode,
Space sword.
my favorite
For that
episode,
sword, let's be honest.
yeah, my favorite episode is the beach. Because it again, it goes to show.
Hey! Don't laugh. Good episode. That is a good episode.
That is a good episode.
We were just talking about that in the chat. We were just talking about
Yeah, I
that
thought
clip.
because I thought it was.
watching it a
I thought it
second
was.
ago.
Yeah, we were. I thought it was from that the clothes thing, but that's not really what I get out of the episode. I don't get the comedy out of that episode. What I really appreciate that episode for is like showing that like, okay, so this show really did their work before they started shooting, or in this case, animating, because every character has depth. You just got to be patient and hang in there. And you get to see like, oh, well, these Fire Nation kids, they're under incredible pressure too. And you almost can level with them for wanting to destroy millions of people's lives. It's just like, it's not
You get
just
that with the
Zuko,
dance
though.
episode too.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the
that
dance
one as well.
school episode. Yeah, you get a lot of
Is
like,
the
Fire Nation,
headband?
like, youth
Is the
life.
beach?
Yeah.
Is the explosion man in the beach? Is that when he shows up or something?
No,
no,
that's
the
the one
explosion
where
man
she's
shows up
at the
at the end
thing
of-
and she's like,
It's the
Can
one
I
where they
play
go to
the
the house
clip?
party. And where they
No,
go,
yeah,
you
no, I
can't play the
remember all
clip,
that. But
unfortunately.
what
But,
happened with the
it's-
gang in that episode?
can I just play the clip of her flirting? I've been listening.
They were just
to
No,
it.
chilling,
you
and
actually-
then Sokka,
you won't
and
be able to
then
play the clip,
some
but-
Firebender
Yeah.
spotted
Yeah.
Aang and tried to send a message to the Fire Lord, and then Combustion Man
That's right.
caught the bird, and then he burned up the message because he'd been paid by
That's
Zuko to
right.
kill them.
Yeah, and
without anybody
like, the
finding
real
out.
reason I like that one is for the moment at the end when they're all by the fire and they're sort of like showing like the toll that the war is taking on them. Like they haven't lived easy lives. Yeah, they're princes and princesses, but like it doesn't come without a price. And just the humanity in this show and the ability to make every single character relatable, even when you hate their guts. aka Azula. You know, it's just like insane to me to see how this show is able to weave these webs that you kind of got to watch this more than just when you're 10 years old. So yeah, that's kind of how I feel about Avatar.
And in the beach when Ty Lee is talking about all of her stuff, like when she's not looking at Azula, like Azula's looking at her and she's like concerned, and then when Ty Lee looks at her, she like looks away and pretends to not be concerned. And it's like this whole thing,
it's like some actual humanity really from Azula.
Yeah, well, it's because, you know, like you see the whole thing where it's like, she's like, my mother thought I was a monster, and like she wasn't wrong, but it still hurt. And it's like, yeah, she acts like she's like, yeah, I'm a monster and I'm okay with it, but like she's not okay with it, and she wishes
she's just insecure.
Yeah,
and,
because she wants to love
you. One instance of her trying to be human.
Does everything,
and it shows in the final episode too when she starts to mentally unravel.
Right,
Before we go to because Andrew just kind of made me realize why I picked this episode and why I picked this character. It's because like I don't watch the show for the the action. I don't really. I mean, that's all bonus stuff, like the intensity of the plot. I watch this show to see the characters and to watch Azula fail at flirting and to watch like fucking Sokka just every time like just embarrass himself when he says that one word too many and he ruins the moment for himself. Like it's just like I'm watching people that are just happen to be animated. It's absolutely incredible.
It's just also amazing character. Also, Sokka's the only character, at least that I've seen from animation, that trips mushrooms in an episode, and it's amazing.
Dude, you mean the cactus juice?
You mean the cactus juice?
It's the quenchiest giant mushroom. Maybe it's friendly.
Dom, those are some sharp clothes, Dom.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. You like it's my college graduation. It's my college graduation shirt that was homemade for us. Do you think it says Guardians of the Galaxy? But it actually says Graduates of the Galaxy.
I'm wearing a Kingdom Hearts 2 shirt.
I love when she's like, and we can be the most deadliest couple in the world and destroy her.
Yeah.
Just go like up
Careful, sharp. They could cut the whole of a fire.
Because they're so sharp.
Rigid, sending thousands to their death.
Leaving thousands to drown in sea.
Because the problem
is they're so sharp.
He's like, cool.
The one scene in The Runaway where they try to send the apology note to Katara from Top, and then she's just like, I know this is from you, Sokka. Top can't write.
And he's like, yeah, I can't believe we forgot Toph can't write. And he's like, all right, so now we got to send a note to Toph from Katara, and then everything will be fine.
So now before we move into the final hour of the show, we're going to take a quick 15-minute intermission and then play Avatar trivia for an hour. The 3-hour podcast.
I feel like I could win that.
I will literally
answer is C, the Nickelodeon symbol.
I was just kidding, but no, for real, Dom. Why don't you take this one and conclude this one here, because I think we've kind of hit the mark, if not more. I thought this was a great episode.
Look, to kind of wrap this show up, and we'll let our esteemed panel guests get their thoughts into. This is a great show. It to me is the pinnacle of everything that animated show could ever hope to be, and it's kind of unfair because it almost set the bar so high that almost every other animated show afterwards like kind of had like they didn't really. I haven't seen a single show since then that is like a kids show. I should say,
including Korra.
Including Korra, yes. That has come close to the level of this show. Like it just so many things that this show got right, from the characters to the themes to the setting, and just like, overall, it's a show to me that is can be universally beloved and watched by anybody. Sorry, Disney, unfortunately, Nickelodeon, Viacom, beat you to the punch there. If I'm giving my rating,
I argue that Steven Universe is the most well put together and comprehensive show, but
that's a different podcast. Dom, what were you gonna say?
The point being is that I don't give this rating out lightly words, but it's crazy when I can give a show that arguably technically isn't perfect, because it does have its fair share of filler episodes. But again, like Chris was saying, it's the sense of where those filler episodes just help you add more context and help flesh this show out and this world even more. This is a 5-star show to me. Absolutely no question. Greatest animated show ever made, and in my top 10 favorite TV shows of all time. Cut to Andrew's dopey reaction.
Wow.
Now we're on, Andrew. Andrew, give us a quick closing remark and your rating out of 5 stars.
Well, closing remarks. I think that this show is every reason why I really enjoy most of the cartoons that I enjoy and anime as a whole, because it's just like dope action, which I was a young boy once. That's how you get young boys' attention, is flashy action sequences. You got that, you got comedy, you got amazing artwork, you got incredible music, dude. Like Leaves from the Vine sounds like it's a 300-year-old song. and it's not. It's incredible. That's amazing. The voice actors are incredible. Like the best part, I know that this is technically about The Last Airbender, but like even in Korra, like this, they always have the best voice actors, they have the best stories, they have the best music, they have the best characters. If it's not my favorite animated show of all time, it's one of the best and my favorite animated shows of all time, so I'm also giving it 5 stars.
Wow. Luke.
Also, Avatar is anime, fight me about it.
Oh my God. That's another podcast.
What was the question?
Final remarks and rating.
Okay, so I again, this show reminds me a lot of spending time with my dad. I love kind of the cultural aspects to it. I think the art style is great. I think the characters have a lot of depth. I'm gonna say 4 out of 5 because given the resources and what was, when they said shit for the first time on TV and people were like, oh my God, they said shit, and now they just say whatever, and you can do lots of stuff because you can say whatever. That's kind of what this is. I think if this show had been able to come out a little bit later, it wouldn't have made steps for the great things at the 5 out of 5s I would say now. But I also don't think that if it came out now, it would also be 5 out of 5. I think that given the period of time that it came out in and what it was capable of doing and making more real for cartoon writers to be able to exposit, I think that's exactly where it needed to be, when it needed to be, and it was everything that it was everything it needed to be. There were a lot of things we could say, oh, I didn't love all the childish jokes and stuff like that, rewatching it now, but it's that's what it needed to be at the time to get enough people to pay attention to it so that they could have a long enough series that it would happen. I think in terms of giving cartoon characters serious growth and development, it was crucial for things like that. And in terms of just the lore and stuff like that, and the symbolism of the nations, of the bending prowess, the dragon dances, the symbolism just hits again and again and again. I mean, it's everywhere. It's everywhere in the actual art. You see the earth nation emblem and things, and these are resilient fucking people. This is a large swath of land versus the rest of it. What that represents as a people. But then we get to look at such macro moments like Zuko alone or the swamp benders. You get to see these microcosms of what's happening in this big world that's being made, maybe through the lens of these characters that we're following. But honestly, half of the show is the world and just letting the world exist, and they just happen to be in areas where you get to experience it. So I think I would say my closing remarks on the show are watch it once to follow the characters through this plot of this 12-year-old boy becoming the savior of his world, and then watch it again and just completely ignore what's going on with them and pay attention to every extra, every NPC kind of. Look at what's going on with them on a microcosm, and you see there's fully developed communities in the swamp benders, in the painted lady, the fishing village, all those people just kind of function, and
Kyoshi village,
they're just there living with exactly, and half of them can't do these crazy powerful things that other people can. So it's a very human story happening in a setting where everything is superhuman, and I think that's incredible to be able to have such nuanced characters and environment.
I think that's a great thing to add there, Luke. It's just that the world is just amazing. They didn't just create a backdrop; they just fleshed out a world, and they were just
important as
it was just
characters.
Welcome to the world. You just happened to be watching during Avatar Aang's lifetime, kind of shit, and that's. Really, that's what
it's
makes
one of those
really
situations,
awesome shows like that. And that's why Lord of the Rings is amazing, because it's just such a fleshed out world.
Right. And this thing
that's why all that stuff is so good.
This is a point a lot of people in clickbaity trendy videos are oh, what movie world would you live in? I usually don't like to buy into those. I'm you can find arguments in every single world that there's stuff in that world that would kill you. But honestly, Avatar, I wouldn't mind living in that world, because the odds are I'd probably end up being a badass bender, and that would be awesome. And just that world just seems so awesome to be able to explore.
Plus, according to the hand chart I found, I'd be in the Fire Nation,
be?
so I would have been safe.
Yeah,
anyway.
I don't know. I still got to figure that. I have a feeling the whole thing of like I would want to be a waterbender and airbender, but I'd probably end up being an earthbender.
Hold up your hand, Dom. I can tell you right now. Hold up your hand. You're an airbender.
Oh, sweet. Awesome. I take that. All right.
I
Chris,
wanna
be an
close us off the star ratings.
Tricks and
Yeah,
stuff.
so I actually prepared some words.
Whoa. Whoa. He wrote some stuff down. God
Chris is
damn.
gonna read his.
Oh,
next
boy.
3
Here we
hours. Chris will
go.
be reading his.
Yeah,
Here
this
we
is
go.
why.
Avatar.
This is why this is a 3-hour one, because Chris has prepared an hour-long
Yep.
sermon.
Yeah.
Our thesis.
So, spoiler alert. Avatar. Really, really good. Great show. Chris loved this show. This show resonates on many levels. Avatar, wild ride, ride over, now sad, 5 stars. So,
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow.
Nice. Very
Honestly,
very eloquently put.
No one can top that. We got to end it here.
Absolutely. Yeah. So
with
What a
that
high
being
No
said,
2
chance
hours
anyone
and
can
2
say
hours.
anything more
That's pretty
profound than
good.
that.
yeah, we always throw it to the guest first. And since Luke is our newest guest, Luke, where can the people find you and keep up to date with all things that you do? Not that they'd want to, but just in case they want
Wow,
to.
okay, way to
why don't
throw
you
your
take the
friend under
stage
the
one
bus.
last time here, Luke?
Cool, because Cheddar just got here, and I'm gonna go look at a comment. I'm gonna look at Sozin's comment. So my name is Luciano Ferrara. You can find me not at Chungle Down Bim. That's not gonna give you anything. But you can check out my band, The Ensuing Disaster. We are doing what all other bands are, which is maybe something, maybe nothing. That's kind of what it seems like. You can also check out my journal portfolio site, which has like a lot of fiction writing, some poetry stuff, my thesis, some excerpts of my novel and things like that. And if we ever like get it back together, I DM a homebrew D&D campaign based on that novel of lumberjack folklore. You can find us on Twitch at Fearsome Critters RPG. Chris is one of my PCs, and so is Johnny. And that's a lot of fun if we find a way to archive all of our back episodes and put them up. Yeah, and you can find me at Luciano R. Ferrara. And what's up? Sorry. One last thing. Also, I write for a music journalism site called The Alternative. We are at Get Alternative and getalternative.com. We are a fully independently funded Patreon site that does music journalism. Thank you.
Sweet. Thanks for being here, Luke.
thank you for being here. Luciano Ferrara, everybody.
We'll put
was
all
great.
of your links in the description, as well as for our next guest. And Andrew, by the way, our Marriage Story episode is killing it still. So
Still.
Well,
yeah.
I still don't like that movie, so.
Yeah. So, but hey,
My
man, there's
opinions
things
haven't
Me
you do
neither,
like,
if it
right?
helps. Me neither,
well,
if it helps.
If you like this podcast but don't like hearing Dom's voice, we have a podcast, we being me and Chris, called Talking with Andrew and Chris, that you can go find at Talking Podcast on all the socials. It's Talking with Andrew and Chris on all the socials and I can't speak. The podcast streaming services. That's what I was getting at. Talking with Andrew and Chris. I'm also going to be doing another podcast called Anime Forenzu, which is right here. We're still, getting things together, but it's going to be happening pretty soon, and it's going to be dope, and it's going to be about anime. The Japanese ones, not the what ifs like Avatar, but maybe Avatar also. So stick around for that, and then follow my personal for when I, start doing music stuff again, because like Luke said, maybe I am, maybe I'm not, because it's quarantine, and who knows. Thanks for having me, guys.
Everything's kind of up
Also,
in the air with quarantine.
Play Kingdom Hearts, because it's amazing.
Yeah, Chris. So I'll just run down our stuff because I'm tired. But this was a great episode. Thank you, Andrew, for being here. Thanks to Johnny and Luke for being here, even though they had abrupt departures. Guys, we're the Talking TV podcast. I'm Dom. That's Chris. We have our YouTube channel, Talking TV, No G. We hope you really enjoyed this episode. I had a lot of fun being here. I think Chris did too. So it would be awesome if you could leave a comment, leave a like, leave a subscribe, hit the notifications button so that way you get notified every time we have a new piece of content coming out. I just put out a top 10 list on my top 10 favorite A24 movies. We've got stuff coming out 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We've got watch-alongs. We've got top 10s. We've got reviews. We've got a bunch of other stuff that we've got planned coming down the pipeline. We've got a lot of interesting stuff that we just want to do. That's the beauty of YouTube. We're also on audio. We're on Anchor. We're on Spotify. We're on Apple Podcasts. Any place where you go to listen to podcasts, type in the word Talkin' TV, no G. Chris, why don't you tell the people where they can find us on the social media platforms as well as plug your own information?
You guys can find us anywhere that matters at Talkin' TV, no G, TALKIN TV, and on Instagram, add the word podcast. Dom, they can find me at Christian Ivanko. It's my first and last name. Don't wear it out. There will be music again with Andrew, but like Luke said, who knows what's happening with that because it's growing.
And I am at Movie Nerd Reviews across all platforms, Facebook, Instagram. Those are really the only 2 social media platforms that I'm on. And Chris, without further ado, let's close this off. I think this officially marks it as our longest podcast episode yet. But Chris, how do we close this out?
Yeah, Andrew, there's only one way we like to close out the show. So get the gunk out of your ears, get the soot out of your eyes. Dom,
yeah, drink the morning coffee and watch more
here.
fucking movies, people. Watch Avatar and more importantly, watch more fucking movies and TV. Stay safe. We out.
Watch The Legend of Korra for that next episode.